SABC News.
$900 Central African time on this Thursday. This is the Newsroom Jumbo Africa. I'm Elvis Presley.
Kendall Makamat.
We'll be with you until 12 o'clock. Now, today the focus falls on political parties who have praised the Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan, for what they say was a very good balancing act, given the economic circumstances and the challenges that we face in this country. So we're asking that question, Ken.
Absolutely. What is your reaction to Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan's budget speech yesterday? We know everybody's eyes and ears were on it. What is your reaction to the result?
Well, remember yesterday we wanted to know from you, what do you expect? Now today you can tell us, what do you make of that speech? Now, we are also conducting a poll. 3 organizations have joined the chorus in condemning the march against foreign nationals and immigrants that is planned for Pretoria, for tomorrow in Pretoria, saying that other xenophobes in the country will see this march as an opportunity to openly voice their messages of hatred against immigrants. So this is what we put on the poll, Kendall.
Exactly. We'd like to find out from you, do you support the anti-illegal immigrants march in Tshwane tomorrow?
So far, 102 votes in, 53% of you are saying no. 47% are saying yes, they support this march in Pretoria tomorrow.
Very interesting. Almost split down the middle there.
Yeah, almost split down the middle. But this is what people are saying, Kendall. Temba Slaki Shibango says, no, 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 I don't support it.
Then we've got Shadow Band saying, I support the anti-AU troops occupying your country to protect pimps and drug dealers march.
Well, that's a strong one there. See, Alfana says, no, no, no. It's almost like that song by Amy Winehouse. You remember, no, no, no. But he says, I don't support it because that march is not legalized.
Well, it has been legalized. Hey?
It has now been legalized. Siafana, just to correct you there, that march is now on for tomorrow. It has been approved, so they can go ahead. But right now, let's get down to business and take a look at your news headlines. Political parties have praised the Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan for what they say was a good balancing act, given the economic challenges. Government says it will study the Pretoria High Court judgment on the withdrawal from the ICC before deciding on a course of action. And heavy rain is expected to continue in most parts of the country today, except in the Northern Cape, Western Cape and the Eastern Cape. Of course, that's where drought is still continuing. That's what we have for you in the news. But before we get there, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Elvis, thank you very much. In fact, good morning to all of you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today. Bidvest go top of the class again as they humiliate Baroka FC with a 5-0 masterclass last night.
The first thing you have to look forward to is the number of teams from Africa which will participate in the World Cup.
Less than a month before the CAF presidential election, and the new FIFA president Gianni Infantino holds an extraordinary summit with the heads of African football.
Gray with the return, Drinkwater looking for Jamie Vardy! Leicester City have a goal!
In spite of Jamie Vardy's consolation goal for Leicester, the English champions are still on the verge of elimination from the UEFA Champions League. Now, all this and more we've got for you later on in the Sports Bulletin. Stay with us for the entire 3 hours, because between Elvis and I, we'll be bringing the news to you for that period. For now, it's back to Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this morning. Political parties have praised the Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan for what they say was a good balancing act, given the economic challenges. The African National Congress says the budget is a reflection of its new direction of radical economic transformation. Opposition parties said no one could have done better under the circumstances. In his budget speech, the minister said the Treasury forecasts 2017 economic growth of just 1.3%. That's up from 0.5% in 2016. But it's still well below the government's 5% target. An increase in VAT, which many expected, is meanwhile still under consideration. Gordhan tabled a record R1.5 trillion government budget for this year. It's 100 billion rand more than last year's budget, and Gordhan says it will be funded mainly from tax hikes on the rich. Gordhan says high-income earners will now be taxed 45% of their salaries. Tax experts have welcomed this proposal. Gordhan says this will help boost revenues and trim the budget deficit amid disappointing growth and very high unemployment. Now, there has been criticism of the Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan's budget speech, not including a radical economic transformation. The minister, as this morning, spoke exclusively to the SABC, where he was clarifying the budget speech in detail.
We did use the word radical yesterday. In fact, I also explained what radical is. The radical is when you get down to the fundamentals of a problem, get to the root of a problem, and then you deal with that at a root level, so to speak, rather than superficially. So that's the first thing. The second thing I said is that distinguish between slogans and content. The slogan is fine. What's the content of radical economic transformation? And the speech is full of it. It is actually saying that the biggest issue in South Africa, as I pointed out earlier on, is the levels of inequality, poverty, and marginalization. The third thing is, and I don't want to refer to my two colleagues, I'll have a conversation with them off the media stage, because that's the way we should be behaving in respect of colleagues. If you want to have a discussion, do it privately and either come to a point of agreement or disagreement and then carry on with life. But the deeper question we need to ask is, what is this slogan and narrative about? Is it about genuinely empowering ordinary South Africans, all 50-odd million of them, and making sure that over a 5 or 10-year period they have assets in their hands, they can point to wealth, they can show a change in their prosperity, that per capita GDP is increasing for all of them, and the numbers and the sentiment demonstrate that people are happier. They have a better sense of well-being about themselves. Or is this about covering up for patronage, for cronyism, for a select few benefiting from this process? Because we better learn from the rest of the world. As I pointed out earlier on, when the few benefit and the majority gets left behind, you have the kind of problems that you have in many parts of the world. We've had the few benefiting historically in South Africa. You don't want to repeat that mistake with a different color face now. And so let's get into the content of these matters. You know, and one doesn't know whether some of these slogans are taking us back to last year. Capturing the treasury, controlling the funds, getting access to the public purse, and all of those sorts of things as well. Now, if that's the case, then, you know, why don't we talk about it?
Yeah.
And say, what is the treasury doing that's so evil, that's so unacceptable, except implementing the Constitution and the laws of the country, and making sure that all of us behave by the rules that we've all developed as part of our democracy.
The Justice Minister, Michael Masuta, has hinted that the government may not appeal a High Court ruling that he and President Jacob Zuma revoke the notice to withdraw from the International Criminal Court. The court found the procedure to bypass Parliament was unconstitutional and invalid, as it needed legislative authority. The matter stems from a 2015 court ruling that government should have arrested the Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir when he was in South Africa, who was accused of war crimes. At the center of the South Africa's withdrawal from the ICC last year is the Immunities Act, which it argues is hindered by the Rome Statute. Government believes a sitting head of state is immune from arrest, but the courts refuse to rule on the rationality of that argument. However, the full bench found that the executive was in breach of the Constitution, as international treaties and the repeal thereof are subject to domestic laws enacted by Parliament. Now, heavy rain is expected to continue in most parts of the country today, except in the Northern Cape, the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape. Some roads remain closed due to recent flooding in other provinces. Police divers in the Northern Cape are still searching for a fourth missing person who drowned with 3 others after heavy rains on Sunday. The 4 were in their house on a farm in Ochrabis when they were swept away into the Orange River and drowned. 3 bodies have been recovered.
Expecting the unexpected, this flood came down the Orange River banks, sweeping 3 houses. 3 people, Gertrude Horn, Christopher Tanke and the gracious Jingivale, who were looking for hiding, paid with their lives, with a 4th person still missing, and the police are not giving up.
Members of SABC diving unit, they will be assisted by the search and rescue unit of SABC, who will do patrols in the vicinity of the river, and we will extend the search 10 kilometers downstream.
Infrastructure and vineyards didn't get off lightly. Farm owners say it's the first major disaster in the area since 30 years ago, and they are now counting the cost. Management expressed their condolences to the bereaved families. Family members are coming to terms with this natural disaster. Funeral arrangements are underway to lay their loved ones to rest in a dignified manner. Reginald Witboy, SABC News, Ochrabis in the Northern Cape.
The Gauteng Health Department has promised to move all mentally challenged patients still at the NGOs to public facilities from next week. Now, this was part of the recommendations about the Health Ombudsman. It follows the death of over 100 patients after they were moved from Life Isidimeni in June last year. The Health MEC Gwen Ramakgopa says that the transfer will be done with the legislation advised by the team of the experts that have assessed the patients. Now, she also says that her department is working with 3 state institutions to ensure that all the affected patients are accounted for. And we'll keep you abreast of that story as well. But now, back to our main story and the theme for today. The Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan has tabled a record R1.5 trillion government budget for this year, amid heightened speculation that he could soon be removed in a cabinet reshuffle. This year's budget is R100 billion more than last year's budget, and Gordhan says it will be funded mainly from tax hikes on the rich. Let's now take a look at the breakdown of this year's budget.
As usual, government's apex priority, education, gets a lion's share of the budget. A total of R320.5 billion will be spent on education this year. 31 billion of that will give subsidies to universities, and 15 billion will go to the National Students Financial Aid Scheme.
It's taking us closer to really covering as many NSFAS qualifying students as possible. In fact, a significantly increased number.
Health gets R187.5 billion. Most of the allocation will go to district hospitals, and 32 billion will go to provincial hospitals. 52 billion rand has been set aside for housing. Public transport gets 44 billion rand. The fight against crime will receive a 94 billion rand injection. The South African National Defence Force gets 54 billion rand. Courts and prisons will receive 44 billion rand. 26.5 billion rand will be spent on agriculture. And, as usual, the most vulnerable in society have not been forgotten.
Social assistance grants provide income support to the most vulnerable in our society. These will be increased in April to compensate for consumer price inflation. The old age grant will increase by 90 rands to 1,600 rands for pensioners over the age of 60, and 1,620 rands for those over the age of 75. The disability and care dependency grants will also increase by 90 rands to 1,600 rands. Foster care grants increase by 30 rands to 920 rands. And the child support grant increases by 20 rands to 380 rands a month.
The Department of Home Affairs gets the smallest allocation of 7.2 billion rand. Mbongeni Muchwa, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, that is what transpired yesterday. So we're asking you this morning on our question, what is your reaction to the Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan's budget speech yesterday? Let's take a look at what you have to say to us. This one from Ntelele says that social grants always increase by a meager 20 rand, no matter how inflation looks like, says Ntelele Collins. Monwabisi says, budget speech, why must they always increase child support grant as if they're motivating youth to be pregnant? That's another question there. Unati says, the Minister Pravin Gordhan, that 20 rand is below the belt for the kids. Hashtag budget 2017. And those are some of your comments. You can keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. But now to take this discussion on the budget 2017 forward, we are joined by political analyst, Professor Samadoda Fikeni from UNISA. He's in our Pretoria studio. So very good morning to you, Professor, and welcome.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me.
What do you make of the budget 2017 presented by the Finance Minister yesterday?
Well, I do think that it's a pragmatic budget in a very complex environment of fiscal constraints. At one level, it's trying to increase the social expenditure. And at another level, it is also trying to inject some funds into areas such as your higher education, where there have been demands in the higher education sector for more funding. And at another level, it is trying to do the constraining of expenditure in the public sector. And it is an area that is not well elaborated, because if that is not done, and the economy is not growing as it should, then you are likely going to have an increased expenditure with less revenue coming by the way of the government, because even taxation on the high income groups may have its own limitations along the way.
Mm-hmm. Now, opposition parties are saying that that's the best that the finance minister could do. And the ANC says that the budget is a reflection of its new direction of radical economic transformation. Do you concur with that?
Well, I do think that it could set stage for a new direction in terms of the procurement space. But what South Africa needs, in essence, is the overhauling of structural issues that constrain the economy from yielding more jobs, from growing more impressively than it is, and also from disturbing the patterns, the legacy patterns of ownership. That in itself was not reflected in the budget in a sense of radical economic transformation. For example, you would set aside in a budget of radical economic transformation money for restructuring different sectors. You would inject massively in productive sectors, be it agriculture, where you want it to be more inclusive, or mining, or industries. But in this case, it's still more of an injection into the procurement, or the focus on procurement as a way of empowerment, which is seemingly at this moment a preferred option. But again, one can only sympathize with government given the fiscal constraints at this moment. Perhaps more radical approach could have been taken in curbing inefficiencies in the public sector, duplicated services, irregular expenditure, and so forth, which very often runs into billions.
Professor, this budget, do you think it was pro-poor, and will it address the three-headed demon that we always talk about, poverty, inequality and unemployment, as well as the ever-increasing gap between the wealthy and the poor?
Well, our budget has always been progressive in a sense of leaning towards the poor, hence our social spending. And the social grants are usually a huge chunk of our budget. So to that extent, you could say it shows the elements of being pro-poor. However, being pro-poor in terms of social spending doesn't translate into stimulating the productive sector of the economy, which create jobs. And secondly, it doesn't curb inequality. If you still have corruption so rife, you have patronage so rife, whatever procurement that you have, and remember that government is the biggest procurer in excess of 500 billion every year, it will always fall into the hands of patronage networks which tend to privilege who gets which tender rather than the social impact or the economic impact of the project itself.
Now, with only 1.3 growth expected for this year coming in 2017, can South Africa expect some relief from the ratings agencies who have been knocking on our door from last year already? Because they are saying that there's political uncertainty in our climate here in South Africa.
Surely the rating agencies will be a lot more lenient towards South Africa because they realize that in relative terms, the whole world has become a very uncertain space. So when you say you're downgrading them, you say compared to what? Even the most well-established economies in the north, such as your Britain and the US, are going through periods of uncertainty. In BRICS, you do see Russia struggling, Brazil struggling. So to that extent, the fundamentals are in place. The one thing, though, that could upset the whole system, if you are suddenly going to have a cabinet reshuffle, finance minister being removed or deputy finance minister, new actors being brought in under the cloud and suspicion that it might be part of patronage and factional machinations, that political uncertainty is likely to create policy uncertainty and therefore may be frowned upon by the rating agencies and generally by the investors until the situation is clear.
Do you think, though, after this particular budget, that the Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan is now open to do his job without fear or favour, given the political tensions that you just alluded to? Because we've also seen the nomination of the former Eskom CEO Brian Molefe as an MP, and some suggest that he might be in that position shortly.
Well, I doubt in 2017 you would expect any minister to say I'm certain of anything because, one, this is the big year for the ANC. You're going to have a consultative conference on the future and the nature of the ANC. You're going to have a policy conference in June, July. And at the end of the year, you're going to have an elective conference and a policy conference, which means even if you were to eliminate all other tensions within cabinet and the ANC, that is usually a year of uncertainty as people tend to drift towards their factions and do things as dictated by the logic of factional consolidation. Again, with the president knowing that he will be out as the ANC president, how he's going to play his cards this year is another thing, but it's almost certain that you're going to have a cabinet reshuffle. Whether it impacts on Treasury or not, you still have the relationships, the working relationship between the president and the Minister of Finance not being the best of relationships, therefore not mutually reinforcing each other on any message that the minister or the president might be sending out there.
Professor, thank you so much for your insights.
My pleasure.
That was political analyst Professor Samadora Fikeni. He is from UNISA. So what's your take on this? I would like to get your thoughts on the matter because we are asking you this morning, what do you make of the budget speech 2017? It was delivered by the finance minister yesterday, Pravin Gordhan. So let us know on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom as well as on the Facebook page. Now, as you know, we are also conducting a poll today and we're asking you, Do you support the anti-illegal immigrants march in Tshwane in Pretoria tomorrow? There it is on your screen right now. So far, we have 135 votes in, 22 hours left to vote. 56% are saying no, slight majority there. 44% are saying yes, they support the anti-illegal immigrants march in Pretoria tomorrow in Tshwane. So let me take a look at what you have to say around that. Tabile says no. Yes, I beg your pardon. Yes, says Tabile, I support it. Monwabisi says, oh yes, I support it as well. Temba says, no, 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 I don't support it at all. Hashtag violence, by the way, included there. Those are some of your comments coming through. Keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. Let's do some housekeeping now. The picture of the day comes from Spela, and and it's captioned, they're expressing their frustration. Unemployment. There's no violence, just pure and peaceful. There you have it on the screen. Peaceful demonstrations. Hashtag hire a graduate. Hashtag budget 2017. That was yesterday, that picture taken there. No violence, just expressing their thoughts on the budget. Our comment of the day comes from Tumi Soul, and he says, hashtag budget 2017. Dear employer, fuel gone up, sin taxes up, income tax up, but salary, dololo, nothing. Well, there you have it. That's the sentiment coming there. It's like you can also keep them coming and send us your comments. Let's now take a look at what's happening in the courts, and we're starting off in the Western Cape. An alleged drug dealer is expected to appear in the Athlone Magistrates Court today, after police confiscated 14,000 Mandrax tablets at a house in Guguleto. And we're staying in the Western Cape, where 4 men convicted of several charges related to illegal abalone activities will be sentenced in the Khayelitsha Regional Court today. Moving to the Northwest, the trial of a Marikana-based activist, Napoleon Webster, and 5 others is expected to resume today in Rustenburg in the Northwest. And then finally in Pretoria, a woman and a lover will appear in the Moratele Magistrates Court in Hammanskraal, north of Pretoria today, for allegedly killing the woman's husband and then burying him in a bush in Bosplaas. Sounds creepy, doesn't it? We'll keep you up to date with all these and more, all the stories as they develop. So you have to stay tuned. We'll take a break, but after the break, we continue our discussion on the Budget 2017, the fallout from that. So stay tuned.
Welcome back. Now, tax experts have welcomed budget proposals to increase tax for high-income earners. Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan announced a new top personal income tax of 45% for individuals earning more than 1.5 million rands, as well as a higher tax on dividend payouts. To talk to us about the minister's budget speech focusing on tax, we're joined in studio now by tax expert Zweli Maboza from Priority Tax. Good morning and thank you very much for coming through. Very interesting times.
Yes, I think we have interesting times this year. A lot of things that we did not expect came through.
Now, let's start with the first one. Your reaction to the tax on high-income earners. What are your thoughts on that, 45%?
I think 45% was quite high. We did expect an increase in taxes, Other people, they actually predicted that the minister was going to increase VAT. Others, they thought that he was going to increase personal taxes. But even those who were expecting personal taxes to go up, I don't think anybody expected that it would go up to 45%, bearing in mind that they've also increased dividends tax as well.
Very interesting. We'll touch on dividends tax shortly. I just want to check with you what your thoughts are on how this is going to address the issue of 95% of the wealth remaining in the hands of just 10%. Do you think this will go some way towards addressing that?
Look, it's going to be very difficult. Even though you're increasing this to 45%, you are actually taking it from a very small pool. So if you're taking from a very small pool, it does not make a big difference. Even in terms of what is expected to be collected out of that increase, I don't think that the expectation is that it's going to be that high.
Considering that the minister is looking at raising an extra 28 billion rand, why did they not touch on company tax? Why focus on personal income tax?
Well, I think we need to understand this. Company tax has got its own dynamics in the sense that there's a lot of restructuring that people can do around company taxes. Whereas if you go personal tax, we tax you, you pay that money. You don't have a lot of things like tax losses where you can put in certain expenses. Whereas when it comes to companies, they can structure their transactions. They can put certain expenses. They can have tax losses that they carry forward from previous years. And when the economy is down, companies are not paying tax irrespective of the rate because they may have losses.
So it's a bit of a case of reaching for the low-hanging fruit, is it?
It is easy to collect tax from individuals. It's easy to increase VAT. It's easy to collect VAT, but it's very difficult to deal with corporate tax.
All right. Now, the challenge still remains, though, that like the tax base itself is shrinking. There's been high unemployment exacerbated by the low growth and the lackluster business confidence. How do we broaden the tax base in future to actually get to the objectives that Treasury has?
Look, one of the things that came out in one of the documents, although that was not in the budget speech, is that some bargaining councils have not even been collecting PAYE from their own employees. So that tells you that you may have a number of instances where people are not paying tax. So the best way to broaden the tax base is to look at people who should be paying tax that are not paying tax. Has anybody thought about taxis that are not paying tax? People who are actually earning a lot, millionaires who are actually taxi drivers, taxi owners. But those people are not paying tax other than VAT and other indirect taxes. They don't pay any direct taxes, the majority of them, from what I understand. So I think one needs to look at that and say, how do we broaden this? In addition to that, we need to look at way of cutting expenditure.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the dividend tax that's been increased from 15 to 20%. How is it going to affect investors looking to either stay or come in as new investors?
Investors, the non-South African investors will also be subject to this 20%, except we've got double taxation agreements between South Africa and the countries of their resident. So it is going to affect them. The challenge that you have with this dividends tax is that the effective date for that tax was yesterday, which is something that is surprising because I've never seen something like that where it is, say, with effect from today, you're going to be paying tax at 20% instead of 15%. So that effective date, it came as a huge surprise for most advisors and for most people because it does not even allow people now to maneuver and try and say, if I had turnover or reserves that I've accumulated up to today, I can declare them as a dividend and then pay them so that I actually pay them at tax at 15% instead of 20%. So I think that was a bit unfair.
Is there any recourse for investors who would feel, as you do, that it's a bit unfair that the effective date is at the same time as the announcement is made?
Look, if you have someone who is a strong fighter, they declare the dividend before that the legislation is promulgated. And then they know very well that if now the receiver of revenue is taking them to court, then they'll fight all the way to Bloemfontein. Because at a time, currently we don't have a legislation that is authorizing the state to require people to pay tax at 28%. It's still a draft legislation. Mm-hmm. There's a draft legislation and it's an announcement by the minister, but that's not law. That's the proposal. It's not law. So if someone declares a dividend whilst this is still a proposal, the question is, can you implement the law retrospectively?
Interesting. Let's talk about something else that's hitting people hard in their pockets. The increase of the 30% fuel levy, 30 cents per litre in the general fuel levy, and 9 cents per litre in the road accident fund. How's it going to sit with the man in the street?
Well, it is going to hit them big time because although we've not increased VAT, so it's an indirect way of increasing taxes that are easy, the low-hanging fruit that we're talking about, because everybody is going to be paying. Because everybody, you need to put petrol, you need to put diesel. And if you look at diesel, and in fact the fuel levy, it has been increasing by double digits almost every year. So basically, although we're saying that we're fine because there's no increase in VAT, there is an increase that is affecting people in the street.
Another one that's also affecting a lot of people in the street is the taxes on alcohol and tobacco. They couldn't be spared. They always get hit hard. Are there any other tax avenues that could be explored in future to actually assist government coffers?
I think now we need to look at the expenditure as a country, because you can only expand so much. Unless you look at people who have not been paying taxes. I mentioned now the things that the government discovered about the bargaining councils. So they need to look at things like those. But the focus should be really to say, how are we going to get value out of the money that we spend now? Because it's all good to say we're going to spend so much in education, but do we get the value that we should be getting? It's all good to say now we're going to spend so much in health. But it doesn't help if you go to Eastern Cape in areas like Flagstaff. You find that you go to hospital and there are no doctors. So the allocation of the expenditure to those, they've got good intentions, but in terms of monitoring to see if we get value for that, I think that's where the government is lacking.
Zweli Maboza, thank you so much for that. You've given us quite a good understanding of where it is. The pocket is going to be pinched a little tighter, but we also need to expand the tax base and get value for our rand. Thank you so much, Zweli Maboza from Priority Tax, talking to us about the budget and how it affects the man in the street. That's you and I. And how are we going to be surviving this year? Now, we are asking you, what is your reaction? Because we just got Zweli Maboza's reaction. What is your reaction to Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan's budget speech yesterday? Let's take a look at what some of you out there are saying to the rest of us. Dino Mukharani says the taxpayers should suffer because many people lost their jobs and now we have to cover all that tax. Not fair at all. I would agree with you. Equitable, SABC Newsroom, Pravin Gordhan could have gotten 28 billion rand shortfall from recouping the legal costs the state incurred from poor litigation. Ayet Nazo, the finance minister has outdone himself this time around. The speech was sound and well budgeted. Pity he's the enemy of his excellence. Unati Grootboom says, I want to see that money gets into the right hands and do the work that it is allocated to do. Hashtag budget and budget speech. Interesting enough, rehashing exactly what we've just heard from Zweli Maboza. Now let's take a quick look at what's happening on our Facebook page. As you can see there, heavy rains in the past few days seem to have had little impact on dam levels in some parts of KwaZulu-Natal. Umgeni Water's Shami Harchunder says Albert Falls Dam, which is the largest dam in the Umgeni system, has only risen by 1% to 28%. Then the trial of a Marikana-based activist Napoleon Webster and 5 others is expected to resume today in Rustenburg in the northwest. Webster was arrested together with the other 5 community members following a dispute over the distribution of RDP houses. And finally, the South African National Taxi Council Santaco president Philip Taibosh says the proposed taxi recapitalization program presented to the government will change the life of the taxi industry for the better. You can find these and more on our Facebook page and SABC News website. And for now, we have a quick look at some of the front pages from around the globe. Now, starting in New York, the New York International Times reports that a small group of protesters opposed to the Dakota Access Pipeline were arrested as law enforcement authorities began the evacuation of the main protest campsite. Then move off to China, where the South China Morning Post says Hong Kong witnessed one of the most significant mass demonstrations in its history last night, when 33,000 serving and former police officers held a show of support for colleagues who were jailed for assaulting an activist during the 2014 Occupy protests. And finally, in Israel, the Jerusalem Post reports that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was greeted in Australia yesterday with pomp, circumstance, and a degree of public warmth from the host Prime Minister really displayed during Netanyahu's trips abroad. All right, that's where we're going to leave it. We'll take a short break. Elvis is standing by to take you further.
If you ask this Irish master whiskey distiller why sometimes whiskey is spelt with an E and sometimes without, he'd say,
Oh, to be sure. You're fair so good, look. It's the whole thing. They're back and to get off in the whiskey without the E.
Yeah, didn't catch that. But if you asked us the difference, we'd tell you that every whiskey from around the world is spelled without the E, except for Irish and American whiskies. Get a bottle of Ballantine's Finest blended Scotch whiskey for $149.99 from Tops at Spar.
Let's continue that discussion on the budget speech yesterday. Now, remember, we're asking you that question, of course. What's your reaction to it? And we're soliciting also some views from other avenues to find out what they make of it. And there's the question on your screen right now. What is your reaction to the Finance Minister's budget speech last night? Let us know on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on the Facebook page. Now, the biggest winner in this year's budget was the higher education and training, as Treasury will allocate 16.1 billion rand towards education. Of the total 30 billion rand prioritized or reprioritized expenditure by government for the budget in 2017. Treasury will fund additional allocations over the next 3 years to higher education, with 6.6 billion rand in the 2017-18 year, 7 billion rand in the 2018 and 19 year. However, the National Treasury has also cautioned that the increased demand for higher education is causing other critical government programs to face unanticipated budget cuts. For more on this, on the higher education budget allocation in our studios, we are very glad to have Professor Andre Divendacher. He's the Research Director from the Northwest University in Potchefstroom, the campus there. Very good morning to you, Prof, and welcome.
Morning, Elvis.
First and foremost, I would like to get your reaction in terms of the increased allocation for education. I'm sure that all educators are jumping for joy this morning.
Elvis, indeed, we are positive, although we need to qualify this. At this point in time, the level of subsidy from the state to universities is on a very low level, so there was a big need for increase on that level. Secondly, we know what happened during 2016 with the Feast Must Fall campaigns, so there's a lot of political pressure coming through on the higher education system. But generally speaking, we are positive. It is a positive tendency. The big question, how are we going to use this, and are we going to use this funds in an effective way?
So what I hear from you, Professor, is that it is a win for education and there will be some relief for the universities.
Hopefully that will be the case. And my take on it is it can be very positive if we can also use that money creating capacity. We must take into consideration that the number of students at the tertiary level doubled more or less since 1994. So we have big challenges with regard to capacity. It's not only student subsidy bursaries. It's about capacity. It's about academic quality.
Now, that is something that we were told that there is too many students at universities. Is that a true reflection of what is happening, and that the universities does not have the capacity to hold all the students going through to university?
Elvis, yes, that is my take on the situation as well. I have no doubt in my mind that too many students who are not ready for university are entering that level. And we need to relook our secondary school system on a number of levels. We need to create a bridging process for students, but all of these are costing us a lot of money. My take on the university is it should be an elite institution.
Yes.
And we need to accommodate the best of the best among our students.
And there are alternatives available to students as well, which they are not looking at.
Unfortunately, that is the case. I think any society cannot just accommodate students in the higher education tertiary line.
Now, does this also mean that the Fees Must Fall campaign is now starting to bear fruits because students are calling for free education? And that is this perhaps an indication that government moving in the right trajectory towards this, achieving this free education?
Elvis, yes and no. I am afraid to say that it is a well-known fact that if you protest politically, you are going to get something. And this is becoming a tendency that I'm concerned about in the general political environment. But yes, we need the fees. We need to support our students in a number of ways. And in many ways, I think we can still argue that government can do a lot more. But taking the situation into consideration, we have severe financial, economic challenges. In that sense, it is most probably the best scenario we could have hoped for.
With so much money given to tertiary education, is this perhaps an indication that we might see less of the protests that we've seen last year from the students?
Elvis, yes and no. Normally, when pressure produced something, the pressure is sometimes increased. In that sense, we can expect more of a fees must fall type of campaign. However, and maybe this is the important side, I cannot see that environment creating the same type of momentum compared to 2016. My take is we will have incidents like the TUT one, maybe 1 year, one there, but the general process won't be so coordinated. I also see that the state is taking a lot of measures to prevent this. The economic line is one of them, but also with regard to safety, security and stability.
Do you think that the students will see that particular benefit, especially when it comes to safety and security and the benefit thereof that there must be stability within the universities in order for them to progress?
Well, that is a very important question, and I'm afraid to say I do not believe that is necessarily going to be the case. But your statement is quite correct. We need a stable environment. We need an environment where we can produce quality students. If you listen to Pravin Gordhan, he clearly said we need highly developed skills. That is what we need to take the economy forward. In that sense, universities and other institutions must play a very important role, and they need stability and they need financial support.
Now, it's been reported that some universities, including we see here University of Pretoria, Wits University, as well as Cape Town, are already using their reserves to fund the missing middle students. How bad is the situation, and your university have been affected by this or not?
Yes, all universities are being affected by this, and without any doubt, we are using reserves to keep the academic projects going. I think maybe Northwest University is in a bit of a better position in comparison, for example, to Wits and a few others, but we are still facing a number of big challenges. But we as a university try our utmost to support students, to stabilize the environment and to work on the academic project.
The increase that NSFAS also received, is that perhaps also maybe assisting you as the university from students, from deserving students that get to the university?
Without any doubt, Elvis. We definitely need the NSFAS support. We need to give students bursaries to continue with their academic programs and their careers. In that sense, very important, but the other side is also true. NSFAS alone is not enough to keep the academic project on track. We need more, we need capacity, we need strong academics, we need researchers. These people can take the process forward.
Now, when you started off our conversation, Professor, you did say it is a help, this particular budget. But what do you expect then? Because this is over a 3-year period. Where will the extra money come from that the universities need?
Well, that is the big question. And that is depending on, let's say, the ideology of the current government. Now, the government at the moment are taxing the rich people. And that is a certain philosophy. And they cannot tax them ad infinitum. So I believe we still need private money. We need the ordinary citizen to pay for universities. Otherwise, we are going to lose our quality. We cannot be 100% dependent on the state. So we need a stable economic environment where there's growth and where people can invest in universities.
Professor, I thank you so much for your time and joining us here in
Thank
studio.
you. Thank
Well,
you.
that was fantastic discussion. Professor Andre Devenacher, he is the research director from the Northwest University Potchefstroom campus. So what do you make of all of this? You've heard a lot of views this morning. I would like to get your thoughts on it. What is your thoughts on the Budget Speech 2017? Let me know on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom as well as on the Facebook page. But right now, it's time to take a look at the weather. Well, some say there's floods at some parts of the countries, but we still have drought in some parts of the country. Northwest, not Northwest, the Northern Cape, as well as the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape has been pointed out. So let's hear from the horse's mouth. Philip Hawkins is standing by with your weather forecast.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, let's take a look at that weather forecast. Well, it's going to be another dry one for the southwestern parts of South Africa. The Western Cape, again, missing out on this rainfall that, of course, we have seen in the northeastern parts of the country. Now, some say we are enjoying that rainfall in the northeastern parts of the country. Others say, well, flooding is definitely a problem. And yesterday, again, we're forecasting conditions which are going to lead to generalized floods around the northeastern parts of the country, where the ground has already been saturated by days of driving rainfall and now can no longer absorb any more water. So that's what we're expecting in some areas. Heavy rainfall expected in parts around the far southwestern parts of Limpopo, as well as the far northwestern parts of the Northwest Province, northeastern parts, should I say, of the Northwest Province. So that's where we're expecting those showers into Botswana as well. Low pressure systems drawing this up north and towards Malawi, towards the northern parts of Zambia, and of course into the Central African region as well. By tomorrow, we're going to see a lot less rainfall, particularly in South Africa's northeastern areas around Gauteng as well. Only a 30% chance of showers now forecast for that area, with the rainfall now concentrated for South Africa around the Lesotho Highlands and surrounding areas as well. Once again, though, Cape Town and the surrounding areas missing out on rainfall, despite the presence of a low-pressure system just off the southern coastline. Well, the rest of southern Africa expecting showers and thunder showers, again, primarily on the eastern interior of the continent, but of course towards the west, still expecting a little bit of rainfall, just isolated showers for the most part there. Taking a look at Thursday afternoon's weather, well, of course, Pretoria peaking at 20 degrees Celsius, but do remember that wet weather and wind chill factor definitely make it feel a lot colder than this. So if you're going to be in Pretoria, about a 20-degree high. Johannesburg's at about 19 degrees forecast for today, but perceived felt temperature is going to be a lot lower than that. Do remember that. Cape Town, 30 degrees Celsius. Upington, 32, and expecting some light rainfall there as well. Botswana is warm with temperatures in Gaborone and Soroe at 27 degrees. Temperatures between 25 and 29 degrees Celsius forecast for Zimbabwe for today. And of course, Windhoek there at 27 degrees, just missing out on the rainfall. No rain for Windhoek for today, but do not worry. We are expecting some rainfall to return there not too long from now. Brazzaville's at 32 degrees Celsius, as is Kinshasa. Showers and thunder showers forecast extending all the way from Libreville towards Nairobi, Kampala. Great news for that area. We're starting to see some of that rainfall just moving through the area there. Unfortunately, not quite making it to Addis Ababa yet, but that band of rainfall that we see usually being drawn in by low pressure systems around the Kampala area and the Central African area there, linking up towards the Middle East. That passage of rainfall should start to open up. You can see that already displayed in today's weather forecast. There we're seeing that light rainfall just forecast for the area, moving through there and linking up towards Eritrea and the surrounding areas. Showers and thunder showers also forecast around Morocco, moving into the northern coastlines of Algeria as well. So it's going to be a little bit of a wet one there. Moving on into tomorrow, wet conditions continue, especially for that northeastern region there, Morocco, Algeria, and this time even Tunisia expecting those showers. Ethiopia again into tomorrow expecting isolated showers, this time over a slightly larger area. That's where we're going to leave your weather for now. Stay tuned though with SABC News.
What causes Parkinson's? How common is it?
Your research showed that it's slightly more prevalent in men.
Yeah.
It's equally affected at women as well.
Yeah.
And all races can be affected with Parkinson's. There is no such thing as one race is more prevalent than the other.
Parkinson's disease is the disorder of degeneration of the neurons, therefore exposes one to have those unwanted movements of the body.
I live a normal life. I wake up in the morning, I do some exercises here and there.
It's just a movement disorder. It's going to affect how he lives his life. And I think as a family, it's just helped us get a little bit closer and surround him.
Catch Health Talk every Saturday from 9 to 10 with Dr. Sillo Mutawo.
The fossil hominid sites at Sterkfontein Caves, known as Cradle of Humankind, were declared a World Heritage Site on the 2nd of December 1999. The Cradle of Humankind covers an area of over 47,000 hectares of privately owned land northwest of Johannesburg. Most of the site is on dolomite, a rock type which is slightly soluble in water. There are currently over 200 caves on the site and 13 fossil sites. We know that Australopithecus africanus were present in the cradle from about 2 to 4 million years ago. It is generally known that hominids are close relatives of human ancestors.
It's 10:00 hour Central Africa time. Yes, it's the second hour. I'm Elvis Preslin.
And I'm Kendall Makamate.
Jumbo Africa, if you've just joined us. Now today, the focus falls on the political parties who have praised the Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan, for what they say was a good balancing act, given our economic challenges, Kendall.
And exactly that. We're asking all of our viewers what it is that their reaction is to Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan's budget speech from yesterday.
Let us know what your reaction on the Twitter handle as well as on the Facebook page. Let's take a look at what you have to say. This one from Malcolm says, Tshwane, we are ready for March. Now, this is on the poll that we asked the question. We're ready for the March, but people shouldn't come back from the March and start looting. We'd rather go there and learn.
And then Unata Grootboom comes in and he says, I'm very worried about job creation in this country. It seems we're going to see more people standing in the streets.
Yeah, well, this one from Fabian says, we should be stimulating growth in our economy, not taxing the few that actually pay tax, even more. Poor budget.
Sipa Mahoro says, a bit worried because I didn't hear much about job creation.
This one from Daneo says the taxpayers should suffer because many people lost their jobs and now we have to cover all that tax. It's not fair at all. So Daneo is not feeling very happy this morning about paying more tax. Maybe you're in that bracket, Daneo, where you have to pay 45% of your salary. Well, we're also conducting a poll, Kendall. There are 3 organizations that have joined the chorus in condemning the march against foreign nationals and immigrants. Now, that's planned for Pretoria tomorrow. People are going to walk against illegal immigrants.
Yes.
So this is the question we pose on our poll.
Exactly, yeah. The question that we've got for you is, do you support the anti-illegal immigrant march in Tshwane tomorrow? 146 votes have come in, Elvis.
That's quite a lot. 55% are saying no, we don't support it. That's the spirit. 45% says yes, we support it.
Malcolm Maapula says, Tshwane, we're ready for the march, but people should not come back from the march and start looting. We'd rather go there and learn. So to keep
That's a wonderful attitude there, Malcolm. Tabatso says, you had me at illegal. Of course, I supported it. What?
He says you had me at illegal. Of course, he supports it. You know what? The illegal immigrants, he says, I will support it. Now, Sipa Mahoro says, I support it because these illegal immigrants are destroying our country.
This one from Kapshka says, tomorrow's march should be used to unify Africans rather than perpetuating historical colonial borders. Africa unite! There you have my vote, Kapshka.
And Andy says all immigrants are not drug dealers, just like all South Africans are not car hijackers or robbers. That, for me, is the tweet of the day.
That makes the point. Exactly. That's where we got to leave it for now. Let's get down to business. Let's take a look at your news headlines. Political parties have praised the Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan for what they say was a good balancing act given the economic challenges. Government says it will study the Pretoria High Court judgment on the withdrawal from the ICC before deciding on a course of action. And heavy rain is expected to continue in most parts of the country today, except in the Northern Cape, the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape. Those are all your headlines. Let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Elvis, thank you very much. A lot on the go, mostly in the world of football, both on and off the field. Seems like it's going to be a very interesting year this year. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today. Fitness Spits go top of the class again as they humiliate Baroka FC with a 5-0 masterclass last night.
The first thing you have to look forward to is the number of teams from Africa which will participate in the World Cup.
Less than a month before the CAF presidential election, a new FIFA president, Gianni Infantino, holds an extraordinary summit with the heads of African football.
Gray with the return. Drinkwater looking for Jamie Vardy! Leicester City have a goal!
In spite of Jamie Vardy's consolation goal for Leicester, the English champions are still on the verge of elimination from the UEFA Champions League. Right, now time for the news. Our first story, we talk, of course, about the story of the day, which is about the budget, where political parties have praised Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan for what they say was a good balancing act, given the economic challenges. The ANC says the budget is a reflection of its new direction of radical economic transformation. Opposition parties said no one could have done better under the circumstances. Now, in the budget speech, the minister said Treasury forecast 2017 economic growth of just 1.3%, up from 0.5% in 2016, but still well below the government's 5% target. An increase in VAT, which many expected, is meanwhile still under consideration. Gordhan tabled a record R1.5 trillion government budget for this year. It's 100 billion rand more than last year's budget, and Gordhan says it will be funded mainly from tax hikes on the rich. Gordhan says high-income earners will now be taxed 45% of their salaries. Tax experts have welcomed this proposal. Gordhan says this will help boost revenues and trim the budget deficit amid disappointing growth and high unemployment. Now, there has been criticism of Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan's budget speech not including radical economic transformation. The minister has this morning spoken exclusively to SABC, where he clarified the budget speech in detail.
We did use the word radical yesterday. In fact, I also explained what radical is. The radical is when you get down to the fundamentals of a problem, get to the root of a problem, and then you deal with that at a root level, so to speak, rather than superficially. So that's the first thing. The second thing I said is that distinguish between slogans and content. The slogan is fine. What's the content of radical economic transformation? And the speech is full of it. It is actually saying that the biggest issue in South Africa, as I pointed out earlier on, is the levels of inequality, poverty, and marginalization. The third thing is, and I don't want to refer to my two colleagues, I'll have a conversation with them off the media stage, because that's the way we should be behaving in respect of colleagues. If you want to have a discussion, do it privately and either come to a point of agreement or disagreement and then carry on with life. But the deeper question we need to ask is, what is this slogan and narrative about? Is it about genuinely empowering ordinary South Africans, all 50-odd million of them, and making sure that over a 5 or 10-year period they have assets in their hands, they can point to wealth, they can show a change in their prosperity, that per capita GDP is increasing for all of them, and the numbers and the sentiment demonstrate that people are happier. They have a better sense of well-being about themselves. Or is this about covering up for patronage, for cronyism, for a select few benefiting from this process? Because we better learn from the rest of the world. As I pointed out earlier on, when the few benefit and the majority gets left behind, you have the kind of problems that you have in many parts of the world. We've had the few benefiting historically in South Africa. You don't want to repeat that mistake with a different color face now. And so let's get into the content of these matters. You know, and one doesn't know whether some of these slogans are taking us back to last year. Capturing the treasury, controlling the funds, getting access to the public purse, and all of those sorts of things as well. Now, if that's the case, then, you know, why don't we talk about it?
Yeah.
And say, what is the Treasury doing that's so evil, that's so unacceptable, except implementing the Constitution and the laws of the country and making sure that all of us behave by the rules that we've all developed as part of our democracy.
Now on to other news, where Justice Minister Michael Masuta has hinted that government might not appeal a High Court ruling that he and President Jacob Zuma revoked the notice to withdraw from the International Criminal Court. The court found the procedure to bypass Parliament was unconstitutional and invalid, as it needed legislative authority. The matter stems from a 2015 court ruling that governments should have arrested Sudanese president and war crimes accused Omar al-Bashir when he was in South Africa. At the centre of South Africa's withdrawal from the ICC last year is the Immunities Act, which it argues is hindered by the Rome Statutes. Government believes a sitting head of state is immune from arrest, but the courts refused to rule on the rationality of that argument. However, the full bench found that the executive was in breach of the Constitution, as international treaties and the repeal thereof are subject to domestic laws enacted by Parliament. Now, heavy rain is expected to continue in most parts of the country today, except in the Northern Cape, Western Cape and Eastern Cape. Some roads remain closed due to recent flooding. Police divers in the Northern Cape are still searching for a fourth missing person who drowned with 3 others after heavy rains on Sunday. The 4 were in their house on a farm in Ochrabis when they were swept away into the Orange River and drowned. 3 bodies have so far been recovered.
Expecting the unexpected, this flood came down the Orange River banks, sweeping 3 houses. 3 people, Trader Horn, Christopher Tanke and the gracious Jingivale, who were looking for hiding, paid with their lives, with a 4th person still missing, and the police are not giving up.
Members of SABC diving unit, they will be assisted by the search and rescue unit of SABC, who will do patrols in the vicinity of the river, and we will extend the search 10 kilometers downstream.
Infrastructure and vineyards didn't get off lightly. Farm owners say it's the first major disaster in the area since 30 years ago, and they are now counting the cost. Management expressed their condolences to the bereaved families. Family members are coming to terms with this natural disaster. Funeral arrangements are underway to lay their loved ones to rest in a dignified manner. Reginald Witboy, SABC News, Ochrabis in the Northern Cape.
Meanwhile, the persistent rains have kept paramedics busy attending to several reports of vehicles swept into rivers, stranded motorists and pedestrians, as well as displaced homeowners. Some roads remain closed due to the flooding.
Left stranded with no hope of reaching their destinations. Recent torrential rains have added to the Northwest Province's road infrastructure woes. Major routes, including the N4 between Swarregens and Rustenburg, have been closed.
It is basically inconveniencing everyone else. Unfortunately, there's nothing that we can do. It's beyond our control.
Government says it's still trying to determine the extent of the damage before deciding if parts of the province should be declared disaster areas.
Once they have ascertained and a disaster has been declared, it is then that COCTA through that system to be able to assist. But we don't budget for a disaster.
In KZN, poor visibility has caused many accidents. The N2 North near Mpangeni was closed for hours after a head-on collision left 1 person dead. In the Midlands, Newcastle was completely flooded and the main taxi rank closed. In the Free State, however, most residents have welcomed the rains. For over a year, Grunstad and Qwaqwa were drought-stricken.
We did enjoy the rain because at first it was drought.
Heavy rainfalls are expected to continue until Thursday. Lopang Alamu, SABC News.
An anti-illegal immigrants organization, Mamlodi Concerned Residents, have been granted permission by the city of Tshwane to march on the capital tomorrow. They plan to express their dissatisfaction with what they call lax immigration laws.
The planned controversial anti-illegal immigrants march is going ahead. Organizers got the permission after meeting Tshwane Metro officials. However, both the organizers and the Metro refusing to give details on camera.
We are not against foreigners, but now it looks like the government today has no control over the influx of foreigners. Now, if you go all over the world, there is a measure of control in terms of foreigners. So now, today we have got so many foreigners in this country and most of them are illegal.
The planned march comes after a spate of looting foreign-owned spaza shops in Pretoria West. Speaking to some foreign nationals, they tell us they don't believe South Africans are all xenophobic, but rather a few that are frustrated by lack of job opportunities and criminal opportunists that are taking advantage by looting.
Some of them, they are friendly, some of them, they're not okay.
Yeah, we are still worried, but we are staying here. We are also worried about this country also, because these people are also like our brothers, because we are staying here. So this is also our home now.
The planned march has been highly criticized, with fears that it might spread xenophobia. Sipho Stirman, SABC News in Pretoria.
And that's exactly why we're asking you this. Do you support the anti-illegal immigrants march in Tshwane, Pretoria tomorrow? Of course, we've got quite a few votes that have come in, 151 since we started this poll this morning. And of those 151 votes, 45% of you are saying yes, you do support it, whereas the majority, 55%, say no, you don't support the anti-illegal immigrants march in Tshwane tomorrow. And an interesting note is NASA's Spitzer Space Telescope has located a nearby solar system with not one, but 7 Earth-sized planets. 3 of the planets circle their parent star at the right distance for liquid surface water, raising the prospect of life as we understand it. Now, the star, known as TRAPPIST-1, is a small, dim celestial body in the constellation Aquarius. It's located about 40 light years away from Earth. That's fairly close. Researchers hope to scan the planet's atmosphere for possible chemical fingerprints of life. The newly discovered planets are among more than 3,500 planets discovered beyond the solar system, or exoplanets. According to NASA, their discovery sets a new record for the greatest number of habitable zone planets found around a single star inside our solar system. And one of the big stories of the day, of course, has been your reactions to Pravin Gordhan's budget speech, and that's exactly where Elvis comes in. Elvis?
Thank you, Kendall. And of course, that's what we're talking about. It's all about the budget and your reaction to it. Now, as you know, the budget has drawn mixed reaction from opposition parties. However, the finance minister, that is, has been praised for trying to develop a balanced budget in the midst of a very tough economic situation.
We see that he's kept to the government expenditure ceiling and that the budget deficit is coming in at 3.1%, which we welcome. And of course, there was a 28 billion rand shortage with income tax that had to be raised.
The economy only grew by 0.5% in the last financial year. Projection is 1.3% growth. It's not good economic growth.
There's no fiscal room for him to maneuver insofar as implementing such a program. As a result, there was nothing radical in the budget. But once again, I think what he managed to show us was the indication that to a large extent, the finances of the country are in good hands.
The minister is tried by all means to come across and to surf across a very violent tide, a very violent wave. It's difficult because to do the checks and balances here and there. We've got a very ailing economy in our country, economy that is very sluggish.
What is worrying is the fact that we have a 2.2 trillion debt of the government. It is more than 50% of the GDP. And we're talking about 169 billion interest annually.
We are happy that even with those limitations, the minister tried his level best to allocate more to the poor and want to punish the rich.
In the circumstances where economic growth is slow and when, in fact, even global economic growth is slow, which impacts on us, clearly it was a magnificent balancing act that he managed.
We have some differing views from the opposition parties. Now, the DA Shadow Minister of Finance, David Mania, now joins us from our parliamentary studios in Cape Town to take this matter forward. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome, and thank you so much for your patience.
Good morning. Nice to be on your show.
First and foremost, Mr. Mania, what is your reaction to the 2017 budget?
Well, the minister had very little political space and even less fiscal space in which to maneuver ahead of presenting his budget yesterday in Parliament. The budget was more or less in line with our expectations, and of course the centerpiece of the budget was his tax proposals to raise an additional 28 billion rand in revenue to plug the fiscal gap in the 2017-2018 financial year. But what we did say is that we were disappointed that the minister spoke about tax increases and didn't speak about spending cuts. We believe that there is significant scope for cutting spending. If you deep dive into the budget, you will see that the ministers penciled in 14.3 billion rands worth of expenditure on bloated executives and legislatures throughout South Africa. Now, if you look at that figure carefully, in the Western Cape, which is under DA control, the legislature will cost about 40 million rand next year. But if you look at Gauteng, which is under ANC control, the Gauteng legislature will cost about 110 million rand. Now, somebody needs to explain the variance between those figures. And it suggests to us that not only in this line item, but in every line item of government's budget, there is further scope for spending cuts. And that's why we proposed ahead of the budget that government implement a comprehensive spending review to review expenditure across all three spheres of government, national, provincial and municipal government, and the state-owned enterprises, in order to identify savings so that we can reprioritize expenditure over the medium term between 27-18 and 2019-20. That is the only way that we're going to be able to direct expenditure to give opportunities to young people who do not have jobs or have given up looking for jobs in South Africa.
Do you agree with the minister in terms of the 45% tax on those earning more than 1.5 million rand? And will that help the fiscus?
Well, I think that what's being missed here is that, in fact, a total of 16.5 billion rand will be raised in additional personal income tax. So it's not just taxpayers in the upper tax brackets that will be affected. It's in fact all taxpayers who pay personal income tax. The new upper tax bracket, which has been established for individuals who have taxable incomes of more than 1.5 million rand, and will now be taxed at a higher marginal rate, raise about 4.4 billion rand in the next financial year. The balance of 12.1 billion rand will be raised from all other taxpayers as a result of limited or no relief because of fiscal drag, which actually brings me back to my original point. If you look at the 4.4 billion rand, which will be raised from the new proposed upper tax bracket, that is roughly equivalent to the kinds of savings that could be clawed back if we reduced the size of the executive from 74 ministers to 15 ministers in the national executive. And that is why we've said that rather than talking about tax increases, we need to talk about cutting spending and implementing a comprehensive spending review.
That almost sounds similar to what Bantu Olomisa is suggesting, and saying that the country should do away with provinces and reduce the number of ministers, and then, of course, you have a saving there. Is that the sort of thought around it as well?
Well, I think a comprehensive spending review would be aimed at looking at the entire structure of government. And we will spend 14.3 billion rand in the next financial year on executives and legislatures throughout the country. And it's clear to me that by reducing the size of the executives and also by reducing expenditure on legislatures, there could be significant savings, which then could be reprioritized in order to, as I said, provide opportunities, especially for young people who do not have jobs or have given up looking for jobs in South Africa.
As the Shadow Minister of Finance for the DA, how do you think we could get a better economic growth in this country when we have a situation where the banks are colluding against the people of South Africa?
Well, one of the issues that wasn't sufficiently addressed by the minister yesterday was the whole question of economic growth. I said that the minister had very little political space in which to maneuver, and it was clear from the speech that economic policy, both the development of economic policy and the implementation of the economic policy, has now been centralized in the presidency and is almost beyond the reach of the minister. That is why there were no new proposals to boost economic growth in the budget speech. The minister's hands were effectively tied behind his back, and he's not able to make proposals to deal with the economic crisis in South Africa. That is why every year the Minister of Finance is more or less reduced to pleading with ministers to implement the National Development Plan. Of course, that is not happening because of the civil war raging within the ruling party, which of course has spilled over into the executive, and there's now uncertainty about government, the direction government is going to take on economic policy. And that's why there's so much policy uncertainty and so little investment and economic growth in South Africa.
But Mr. Mania, what is the stance of the DA and yourself in relation to the banks? Do you think that the banks should be charged with sabotage?
What I do think is if it is shown that the banks have been engaged in behavior which is illegal,
well, they've been found to be colluding with each other.
If banks have been found to be colluding, or rogue traders have been found to collude with each other in order to boost their own bonuses, then they should face the full force of the law. We can't make a distinction between white-collar and blue-collar crime. If you break the law, then you must face the full force of the law.
I know that we were talking about the budget. There's one more issue that I just want to touch with you basically and briefly, and that is the DA's case against the government. The ICC came out yesterday saying that the decision was irrational to not hold the president of Sudan captive in South Africa. Your thoughts quickly?
Well, we were obviously delighted with the outcome of that case, and it's now over to government, and it'll be interesting to see how they react.
Thank you, sir, for your time and joining us here.
Thank you.
That was the shadow Minister of Finance from the DA, Mr. David Mania, from our parliamentary studios in Cape Town. Interesting take there. So we'll take a short break, but we'll continue this discussion right after that. I'd like to get your thoughts on the budget 2017.
This Ford Cougar thing is becoming a hot potato for them, excuse the pun.
US carmaker Ford has finally admitted that a fault is causing some of its Ford Cougar SUVs to catch fire, and
it also formally issued a recall in South Africa.
Ford needs to take accountability.
We'll work with our dealers and try to come up with a way that satisfies them.
Probably we should ask the question, is the ICC targeting African leaders?
For the life of me, I would hate to be charged with crimes against humanity. Very few people can deny nor ignore that there are crimes being committed on the African continent at this very moment. Now, we need to be able to hold people to account regardless of where they are from.
South Africa has a body of international law that it's committed itself to, that seeks to counter impunity in the world when it comes to gross human rights violations. In this specific instance, we have a problem. By the way, you must remember that South Africa has a law on extradition and mutual legal assistance that enable us to extradite any fugitive of justice from anywhere in the world so that they can stand trial for whatever crimes
Welcome back. Now, economists have commended the Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan's efforts to contain the headcounts in the public sector. The number of civil servants has stabilized at around 1.3 million staff members. However, compensation of employees continue to take a lion's share of the total government expenditure at 35%. Chief Economist at Investment Solutions, Lasiva Matata, now joins us in studio. And he says that government still has a long way to go to bring its salary bill under control. Is that correct, Mr. Matata? Very good morning to you.
Good morning to you. Well, the headcount has plateaued, so there's no new hires that are happening. But the growth rate in wages are quite robust, are significantly higher than 6%. In fact, from 2008, the wages of public servants has almost doubled. Since 2008, you can appreciate that after the financial crisis. In relation to the private sector, where wage growth is 4.4%, you could see there's a huge difference between the two. That said, it just means that if this year's discussions on wage negotiations continue to maintain the same high level of growth in wages previously, there may be risks to this fiscal outlook that has been put out. And in it, we may still be talking about a bloated wage bill as we continue from here.
So you heard earlier when we had the DA on the line, and they said that they need a comprehensive spending review to take place. Should that form part and parcel of this review, you think?
Well, the review has happened. This now we're talking about the wage bill in the last 3-4 years. And the minister has continually put a ceiling on expenditure, which now has gained credibility because it's consistent. You see it happen every single year and maintained. So both investors and rating agencies have become very confident that what gets put out from the Minister of Finance gets done. The review is done. It is quite lofty, however, in terms of growth, but that can be done in the margin. But the review is done and it's been implemented now.
Expenditure within the state-owned entities, isn't that also something else that we could look into, as well as expenditure within government? There was a cap, for instance, on vehicles that government employees could buy, 750,000 rand. But we understand the other day in the newspapers that the Minister of Mining bought a car over R1 million, him and his deputy.
Well, those type of expenditures needs to be actually understood and why we got to those conclusions. I'm sure there are some idiosyncratic issues to be discussed and found there. If one is found wanting, they ought to be brought back into book. But if you just looked at the trajectory, which is more important for investors, for rating agencies, for all of us that are looking at the country, the trajectory has been that of containing growth in expenditure, especially that of wasteful expenditure, which is all very welcome from the business community.
With all the spending cuts, is it possible that government can reach that target of 28 million, that shortfall that we require?
Indeed, they can. Yeah. No, well, it has been met. It was met with revenue collection. So the wealthy gets to pay a lot more on taxes. The wealth-related taxes also went up to plug the hole. There could be a loophole when you have personal income tax at 45. You can have trusts, you can have companies, you can channel money in a different construct to not achieve that tax cut or tax hike that is happening elsewhere. All those are creating an environment where much of the tax is coming back to the fiscus. There could be more going forward. In fact, that's top of mind.
Yes.
You see, right now, fuel is tax exempt on VAT. Next year, 14% could arrive on your petrol price bill.
And that's going to be a huge one.
That's a huge one. You could see already they're introducing the concept in the review. It will be much conversation going forward from here.
Now, talking about VAT, because we talked about it just before the budget speech, that was not touched, but the minister did mention that they will look into it.
Oh, well, it is such a pervasive tax, and the guys at the Treasury get it. They don't want to be another Japan. Remember in 2014, Japan increased its VAT, and the ensuing 24 months was a deep recession. You don't want that, and they get it. VAT is quite effective in getting money into the coffers, but it could prove very erosionary on growth. Remember, every single aspect of our lives, we pay VAT. If it goes up, in fact, it will be now higher than Nigeria. See, Nigeria is a big economy, and we ought to just think about that as well. Its VAT is 5%. Planning to go to to 10%, but is well below where we are sitting at 14.
But will an extra 1 or 2% hurt the economy very badly, and will the poor suffer, you think?
I think so. I think it will be very erosionary. Right now, we're sitting right at the bottom of the economic recovery. It's still very nascent. It's fledgling. We need to see it come through. There's green shoots, but you just levy it with such a tax, you may thwart it.
A low-hanging fruit was the rich, of course, 45% if you earn more than 1.5 million a year. Will that hurt the rich at all?
Well, you know, it's only 4.4 that gets back into the economy. But we need to appreciate what has been happening in the world. There's now a consensus view, which was expressed at the World Economic Forum, that inequality has really become so exaggerated. In other words, in SA, in fact, we have a case study of what inequality can do in a country. With that, Thomas Piketty, who has received much audience in SA than elsewhere in the world. And I will argue that this budget is an expression of a Piketty view. He has merit in what he was talking about, in that, when you're earning so much money and there's so much need elsewhere, it has to just be redistributed somehow. However, there are challenges. Those that are incumbent have created a much more vigilant society to demand fruit.
Now, other tax options. What other tax options do we have to raise money in this country in order for everybody to basically gain from it and to basically create, in essence, closing that gap between the rich and the poor?
You know, I think on the tax side, we have now pushed the lever to the maximum. We have revved it up. It will continue. If you look in the plans in the next 3 years, we'll continue to have more tax hikes. That disposition is understandable, but it's not enough to just understand and have it there. The conversation needs to be, now, what do we do on structural economic reforms? How do we create a new economy, so to speak? Because you have to have a going concern, which is what the minister was expressing. Now we need a new economy, right? This depression in business investments needs to actually turn around. We need to think about new ways to creating, in a way, a parallel but much more advanced economy elsewhere. These are type of conversations that one is hoping we could have.
Have the finance minister kept the wolves from the door, the ratings agencies who are planning to downgrade us? And do you think that that was enough in terms of the budget for 2017-2018 moving forward to make sure that we are where we are, or perhaps being upgraded?
I think upgrade needs to happen from here. Technically, on the 24th month will be December, where we're sitting on negative review by Standard & Poor's. They should consider upgrading us from a negative view to stable. Barring what happens domestically with the political issues, somehow there's a preoccupation about that. It comes in every analysis that we find, expressed mainly by Fitch ratings, about what is going on in the politics. And I'm hoping that those that are in authority ought to make sure, right, that that part of the bargain is held stable. A difficult discussion, stable but mature. With that, if it happens, we should be going to a more better outlook than we had in 2016.
Mr. Matata, I thank you so much for your time and joining us and giving us your views. That was the Chief Economist at Investment Solutions, Lasiwe Matata. But I would like to get your views as well. You can let us know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle as well as on the Facebook page. We'd like to find out your thoughts around the budget 2017 that was delivered yesterday by the Minister. Has it impacted you at all? Let's move on to other news now. In Parliament now, the Social Development Minister, Batebile Dlamini, has assured members of Parliament that social grants will be paid in April. Now, this despite admitting that her department failed to meet a Constitutional Court deadline to insource the payment of social grants from April the 1st this year.
In 2013, the Constitutional Court found the department's contract with then grant distributor Cash Paymaster Services to be unconstitutional. It ordered that the contract not be renewed when it expires next month. But today, the minister and SASSA officials told MPs they will inform both the court and National Treasury that they have no other option but to negotiate a new contract with the same service provider for a period of at least 18 to 24 months.
what we want to do is to ensure that the current or contract is not taken as is, because we do have some disadvantages with this other contract. Firstly, the deductions from the grant recipients.
Opposition party MPs were livid. They accused the minister, the department and SASSA of disregarding the ruling of the Constitutional Court.
We need clarity in terms of how much it is going to cost to extend this unlawful and illegal contract. And we need clarity whether it is true that in the first part of your negotiations, if any have been there already, that they're going to charge you an extra 1.3 billion to pay out grants. Also on the 1st of Feb, we heard that you want to extend this contract with CPS and Net1 for a year. Now we've heard that you want to extend the contract for 2 years.
Just 5 weeks away, still to negotiate period of contract costs, unfavourable conditions, special beneficiary payment accounts. None of which yet, 5 weeks away, has been finalised, nor has the court approved it. And I hear that the minister says it doesn't matter what the court says, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are, we will pay.
The ANC, however, expressed its satisfaction with the assurances that come April the 1st, social grants will be paid out as normal.
The ANC will deliver. We've been paying out grants for 23 years. And we didn't stop paying out grants. And I can't see how are we going to stop on the 1st of April. I don't see any national disaster.
SASSA is expected to open negotiations with Cash Paymaster Services next week and file its report with the Constitutional Court soon afterwards. Lukhanyo Khalada, SABC News, Parliament.
Well, there you have it. That's your news for now. We'll take a short break, but when we come back, Kendall Makamate will be back with your sports news.
SABC News brings the world closer to you.
Sherwin Bryceby's SABC News, Washington.
Jam Whitehead, SABC News in London.
Mzandile Mbejo, SABC, Sochi, Russia.
I'm Sarah Kimani signing off from Kigali for the SABC News.
Other than that, I've enjoyed every single moment of it.
Crisalda Lewis, SABC News at Wits University.
SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Welcome back. My name is Kendall Makamate, and it's time for the sports. Now, it rained goals in the two Absa Premiership matches played last night. 5 goals were scored at each of the two venues as early title holders SuperSport United and Bidvest Wits won 4-1 and 5-0 against Maritzburg United and the helpless Baroka FC in Pretoria and Johannesburg, respectively. The Clever Boys are back at the top of the log, while Amatsatsantsa are third. Now, we'll bring you more detail on that in the next hour. Staying with football news, though, Italian giants Juventus are firm favourites to advance to the next round of the UEFA Champions League after a valuable 2-0 win away to the Portuguese side FC Porto. And Jamie Vardy's first Champions League goal gave Leicester a lifeline in their last 16 tie, this despite going down 2-1 to Sevilla in the first leg last night.
Despite Sevilla's dominance, keeper Kasper Schmeichel's heroics and Vardy's strike means the English champions are well in the tie ahead of the second leg at home on the 14th of next month. The two sides are in contrasting form, currently with Sevilla just 3 points off the top of La Liga, whilst Leicester face a relegation battle just a year after defying all the odds to win the English Premier League. Sevilla's first big chance arrived 14 minutes into the game when Joaquim Correa was brought down inside the box. But Correa wasn't successful with a tame effort that Schmeichel easily saved. Sevilla finally made their dominance count when Pablo Sarabia scored his 9th goal of the season midway through the first half. Sevilla doubled their lead, with Correa redeeming himself from close range.
With support. It's a great chance for two, and it is two for Sevilla.
However, Claudio Ranieri's men responded to get an away goal that could prove vital in 3 weeks' time.
Leicester City have a goal and a foothold in the tie.
Croatian star Marko Pijaca and Dani Alves came off the bench to strike late as Juventus overcame a 10-man Porto 2-0. Porto hosted Juventus, the beaten 2015 finalists, looking for their first win in 4 meetings between the sides and brimming with confidence after a recent 6-game winning run. But the hosts were dealt a major blow in the opening half, with midfielder Alex Telles sent off for a second bookable offence in the 27th minute. The 21-year-old Pijaca broke the deadlock just 6 minutes after coming on. Former Barcelona star Alves scored with his first touch of the game to wrap up a precious win for the Turin Giants.
Alexandro plays it in, unmarked and deadly.
Sfiso Ramara, SABC News.
Now, FIFA President Gianni Infantino is in Joburg, along with reportedly every single president from the 54-member CAF, for a closed-door meeting over 2 days. The meeting is ostensibly about briefing the African Federation about how the future expanded World Cup will work from 32 to 48 teams. Usually, the only time all association presidents gather together is for annual FIFA and CAF congresses. So to call this meeting unprecedented is totally apt. The meetings, which are being held behind closed doors, will be followed by a trip by Infantino to Harare on Thursday to join birthday celebrations for the Zimbabwe Football Association President Philip Chiangwa. Chiangwa is a vocal critic of Issa Hayatou and is backing his opponent Ahmad, the head of Madagascar's Football Association, in next month's CAF presidential election. Infantino's planned presence in Harare is seen as a tacit sign of support for the anti-Hayatou camp. Hayatou and CAF last year formally endorsed the candidacy of Bahrain's Sheikh Salman, who Infantino beat in the FIFA presidential elections. The CAF elections are to be held in Addis Ababa on the 16th of March. Now, 400-meter Olympic champion and world record holder Wade van Niekerk and his coach, Taxation Botha, were awarded the 2017 FVA de Klerk Goodwill Award in Cape Town on Wednesday evening. The award gives recognition to individuals and organizations that have made exceptional contributions to the promotion of goodwill between all South Africans. Former President FVA de Klerk presented Van Niekerk and Botha with the award for their wonderful achievements and the manner in which they represent South Africa on the world stage.
24-year-old Van Niekerk rocked the athletics world at the 2016 Rio Olympics, and he won the 400-meter gold medal in a world record time of 43.03 seconds. Breaking the 17-year-old record of the legendary Michael Johnson. 75-year-old Anna Botha, affectionately known as Tannie Ants, has been working with Van Niekerk since 2012 and takes the job seriously and regards it as a huge responsibility to get her athletes to develop their full potential.
It was a great moment for any lover of athletics, for any lover of sport, to see a truly stunning performance. But they were a team, and their teamwork inspired South Africans from all our communities and from across the social and political spectrum.
Earlier in the day, Van Niekerk, together with his mother Odessa Swartz and Botha, were at Groote Schuur Hospital, where he has joined forces with multinational information and communications company T-System. Aim is to streamline services at the neonatal unit of Groote Schuur Hospital, particularly for preterm babies. 25 years ago, Van Niekerk was born preterm at 29 weeks and weighed only a kilogram. While the fighting spirit has certainly helped the 400-meter champion, whose performance at Rio lifted a nation.
If I think about it, a few years ago, we literally just went out there representing the team, representing my family and friends, and we ended up representing a nation. And it's such a massive honor to receive this award.
South Africa is a country that is often defined by race. Van Niekerk and Tannie Hans have showed the way on and off the track to help inspire South Africans from all communities. Craig Murray, SABC News, Cape Town.
There you go. Now, born a premier and now world champion, just goes to show once again, it's not how you start, it's how you fight and finish that actually makes the difference. Now, some of the European Tour's top golf players attended the opening of the refurbished clubhouse at the Soweto Country Club yesterday. The players who are competing in the Joburg Open today also passed on some valuable skills in the coaching clinic at the club. My colleague Taxation Todd spoke to Joburg Open promoter Bongi Mukaba about the event.
It is still happening. Yesterday was totally out of our control. If people remember, February last year, the country was crying and desperate for rain. And 2017, heavens opened to my unhappiness, because we need to run a successful tournament.
Yeah.
But we can't control the weather, unfortunately.
Look, so far, let's start off. I mean, it's been tremendous couple of weeks of golf. Beginning of the year, beginning of Feb, you had the SA Women's Open, you had the SA Open, plenty of golf all around. I know you're happy with that. This is one of the big ones, co-sanctioned European Tour, as much as Sunshine Tours. Most importantly, that Claret Jug, I always enjoy coming and sitting next to it. Another big field expected. It's always good having the city of Johannesburg hosting the Joburg Open, and it grows bounds and bounds every year.
True. Tabiso, there's a couple of things. Like you said, the tournament is co-sanctioned with the Sunshine Tour and the European Tour, and the involvement of the RNA, partnership with the city and the tournament, is that 3 of our top 3 finishers, if they're not already qualified, they automatically qualify to play in the Open, which sets the Joburg Open apart from other tournaments. A field of 206 professional golfers with 4 leading amateurs, that basically makes the Joburg Open the biggest tournament in the world.
We're looking at some of the pictures now. This is from earlier Wednesday. A wonderful day you had out there, as you can see, some of the big boys of the game mingling with some of the hopefully big boys soon of the game. Take us through today. What exactly did that mean for you guys and these golfers going out to the Soweto Country Club?
It was a beautiful day in the sense that history was made. Soweto Country Club, through a public-private partnership, government and business contributed to the refurbishment of the Soweto Country Club. The country club looks amazing. You look at the country club, it could be a country club in any other golf course in the country, which is a plus for the people of Soweto. But that's not where it ends. That is actually phase 1. Phase 2 would be the fencing of the entire golf course, long-term plan, redesigning of the golf course, and basically having it looking top class, like any other facility you'd find in the country. And those are processes and projects that the city has undertaken with private business to ensure that the facilities that we have, even if they're in the townships, they need to look the part. They need to meet the standards. Because if you look at the Soweto Country Club at the moment, we had 2 professional young golfers, Sipho Bujela and Musualo Netunzi, who actually played as juniors.
I think we have a picture right now, actually.
Absolutely. They played as juniors at the Soweto Country Club, and today they're playing as professionals. So it was an amazing experience for the children to actually have people that they can look up to.
I think that's probably the other thing I was coming back to. You know, sometimes you see these big golfers, you see these big names, we say, we bring them in the country, they come here. Bringing them to what South Africa is about, because at the end of the day, it's about the transformation, it's about bringing the sport back to the people, not only have fun in the north, but actually to bring these kids in and say, you can be one of these great players as well.
We had more than 100 children. Kids that came from Soweto, from the schools in the greater Alexander area, kids that came from Nuclear. And thank you to the Gauteng Education Department for allowing us that opportunity, because in the areas that I've mentioned, we have former professional golfers who are actually training these kids on a daily basis. But to have your Trevor Immelmans, to have Hayden Poitras, our defending champion.
Yes.
It has been an amazing experience for those children because they see these professional golfers on television, but to actually engage and interact with them was a different experience. But we've always said to people should not look at us going through development and thinking we're expecting to produce professional golfers. There are a number of different careers that come out of the sport. You know, right now, it rained yesterday. The greenkeeper was at pains indicating to us why the course was unplayable. But if you look at different careers, even the very children that are going through development can be greenkeepers at some point.
My director says we've got a minute left. Let's quickly look forward to tomorrow. You're expecting to start tomorrow. Hopefully the heavens do not put pay to those efforts. Give us a bit of the field that we should expect.
We're starting tomorrow. We have the likes of Brendan Stone. We have Graham Storm, who won in January the SA Open. Trevor Immelman, we've mentioned. Thomas Aiken is there. There's a number of them. Sipho Bujela. You have Mazibuko, Maketa Mazibuko, who actually finished second at the PGA Championship. So those are some of the big names that people can look up to. But for people who have not bought tickets, we still have tickets available. They can buy them at our Welcome Center. Thursday, Friday, it's 50 Rand per day. Saturday, Sunday is 100 Rand.
Actually, the golf did tee off this particular morning, 7 o'clock, round about there. That's when all the golfers, some 206 of them, teed off at the Royal Joburg and Kensington Golf Club. We've got everybody here from the European Tour. Fantastic event this is. You'll remember that the top three will qualify automatically for the British Open. So this is a it's an elite field, and and there's Brendan Stone he's on a -3. Beautiful stuff. Now, also with me, of course, I've got Phil Hawkins, because the rain has been a big part of this particular Open, Phil. We've been worried that it wasn't going to happen. The Pro-Am was cancelled. We had Bongi from the Joburg City as well saying, look, you know what, it's been a bit of a dampener, but having said that, they have gone on and they are playing. What does it look like? I see you've got a little bit of a graphic behind us there of what we can expect over the next few days. What's going on?
Yeah, so the rain is continuing. It's not stopping altogether, but the good news is this, that we're going to see that rainfall coming down. You can see today's rainfall, as of our earlier predictions, has come down to about a 30 to 60% chance of showers at the moment. For tomorrow's rainfall, this is tomorrow, so it's down to a 30% chance of showers by then, coming down again 30 for the next following days over until the end of the weekend. But temperatures are coming up, so we're going from 22 to tomorrow, 22 the following day, to 23 by Sunday. But of course, today we're only expecting a 19-degree high, so temperatures are getting warmer, rainfall is getting a little bit less, and of course by Sunday we're expecting to see a little bit more sunshine as well. So that should really do a lot to dry out the greens.
Well, talking about drying out the greens, Phil, one of the reasons that this is such a big deal is because this is what is going on around the rest of Joburg. We've got areas which are flooded. We've got cars kind of like trying to figure out how to get around in these massive puddles, I would say, little ponds and lakes.
Yeah, little ponds and lakes are definitely something to worry about there, something to worry about for the golf. It's all over Joburg. I mean, we were saying off air that actually on my way to work every day I have to get from Grayston Drive onto the M1 South, and that on-ramp there has an area where it looks exactly the same as these visuals that we're seeing now at the moment, and it really causes havoc there. The same way, we get the same sort of thing happening on the golf course, on the greens, on the fairways, especially those low-lying areas around the lakes, around the sand traps and the bunkers, things like that. That really gets affected badly. We're going to see a lot of that rainfall really collecting in those bottom areas, and the rainfall can't drain away because the groundwater level is now so high because we've had these driving rainfalls. So that's the problem. We can't drain the rainfall away. It softens up the dirt, softens up the grass, and it's really, really not good for play.
Of course, those were definitely visuals that we saw of actually what happened as well when tropical storm Dinoa hit Inyambane out in Mozambique, but very similar to what's going on in Joburg. Yeah, you can see the bunkers have got lots of water in there.
Yeah.
Quite a thing. You've played this golf course?
I've never played that golf course, but I have played a very wet golf course. And I'll tell you this much, the bunkers get really hard, which not a lot of people really know too much about. And it's really not easy to play any sort of shot out of any kind of a bunker. So they're really going to want to stay away from those.
Right, there you have it, Phil. Thank you so much for that. very valuable having you on board as well as looking at what's happening. We have the golf. The golf is going on. The Joburg Open is definitely happening right here behind me. If you haven't bought your tickets, go ahead, buy your ticket. You catch yourself some live elite golf. That's where we're going to leave it for this hour. We'll be back in a few minutes' time. Top of the hour with Newsroom. Don't go anywhere.
A presumed U.S. drone strike in the south of the country has killed 3 al-Qaeda suspects.
Death toll in Yemen's 18-month-old civil war now stands at about 10,000.
People get killed or die and are actually buried before they're recorded. And we don't have a way of recording that, but we know the numbers are much higher.
Water restrictions are to be imposed on villages in and around the Nkomazi municipality.
Pumps can't pump the water because there's no water in a river. And if the water is coming back, then it's full of mud.
Those who can pray and those who can do any miracle to make sure that we've got enough rain, give it a try.
Hello and welcome to the final hour here on the Newsroom. I'm Elvis Preslin.
I'm Kendo Makamati.
Now remember that you can engage with us on that topic today. We're asking your thoughts on the Finance Minister's budget speech yesterday, 2017. We'd like to get your reaction on the Twitter handle as well as on the Facebook page. Let's take a look if there's any of the comments still coming through, see if there's any more that you've sent through to us to engage with us on the topic. It seems like we haven't got any of those right now, but we'll come back to those. But let's take a look at what's happening on the poll that we all... In fact, there's the poll here, Kendall.
Yes, I would really like to see where our viewers' thoughts are, because it's been actually very interesting to see how the voting has gone to the question about whether they support the anti-illegal immigrants march in Tshwane tomorrow.
So far, 168 votes in. 54% of you are saying no, we don't support this anti-illegal immigrants march. And 46% are saying yes.
Now, the comments that we've got, Malinga comes in with the march plan for tomorrow cannot be the best solution to South Africa's problems at all.
This one from Zake says, my vote is yes, I support the march.
Malcolm Maapola says, Tshwane, we're ready for the march, but people shouldn't come back from the march and start looting. We'd rather go there and learn. Interesting, Elvis, is very similar to what the voting has said, like pretty much split down the middle.
Very sober thought there as well. So keep them coming. You can still vote. You've got about a couple, 20 hours or so left. So let us know what's on your mind. Let's take a look at the question of the day when we're asking your thoughts on the budget speech. This one from Lachasa says, I am glad that he increased the price of alcohol and tobacco, but he we should have given 2,000 Rand for the old age grant, says Lachasa. Let's see if there's another one there. Is there another one now? Well, it seems that we haven't got that one, but we'll come back to some of your comments. Now, an anti-illegal immigrant organization, Mamelodi Concerned Residents, have been granted permission by the city of Tshwane to march on the capital tomorrow. Now, they plan to express their dissatisfaction with lax immigration laws. So, but before we get to that story, let's now go to Parliament, where Malusi Kagaba is speaking to the media, the Minister of Home Affairs.
This, to a large measure, a complex and delicate matter. Reckless abandonment of the core values of Ubuntu will only lead us into a clumsy and irresponsible reaction. We must respond in a humane and lawful manner, taking into cognizance the genuine frustrations of our communities, while remaining mindful of tempers likely to spark violence and other acts of criminality. there will be no progressive and sustainable victory in xenophobic violence. Opportunistic individuals who partake in it erode the human face we have struggled very hard to acquire. While a more measured approach may not make me the most popular politician, I believe it is the right thing to do. Our democracy enshrines our hard-earned human rights. We are first and foremost humans. This reality cannot be diluted by your country of origin or what documents you hold, or lack thereof. Humanity, within the context of our Constitution, is not only a cultural prescription of Ubuntu, it is also about legal compliance and respect for rights of all persons. Law and order are therefore critical factors when we talk about migration. We must address matters raised by communities within the legal framework, while ensuring at all times they also raise matters within the confines of the law. Unfortunately, xenophobic violence is not new in South Africa. The country first experienced xenophobic violence in 2008 with attacks on foreign nationals mainly in Gauteng and the Western Cape. The 2008 attacks were investigated by the South African Human Rights Commission. According to the South African Human Rights Commission, among the reasons for the violence were the following. 1, poor relations between local residents and key officials dealing with informal settlements. 2, corruption and indifference of leaders. 3, police unable to deal with the attacks. And 4, capacity problems for those providing effective remedy and promotion of access to justice. In 2015, another wave of attacks was seen in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. It was sparked by a labor dispute over the employment of foreign nationals at the Kwajina store in Isipingo. Among the recurring themes had been the contestation over scarce resources in a climate of unemployment, poverty, and other socio-economic challenges. Currently, in 2017, there are renewed incidents of violence against foreign nationals in Rosettenville and Pretoria West. There are also communities agitating against foreign nationals. In this regard, a protest march is planned for the 24th of February 2017 in the Pretoria CBD by the Mamelodi concerned residents. Disgruntlement raised by communities is around competition for jobs, access to economic opportunities, and alleged criminal activities involving foreign nationals, including amongst those drug peddling and prostitution, as well as the hijacking of houses. I have met with protest organizers and have appealed to them to express themselves responsibly. Government responded speedily to the latest outbreak of violence. We have directed all security officials to be visible in communities and to objectively deal with criminality, regardless of whether it is committed by a South African or a foreign national. We led a government delegation with the Gauteng MEC for community safety to Rosettenville on Monday, 13 February, to make sure that law enforcement agencies are responding to issues raised by communities and to encourage dialogue between communities and authorities. Arrests have been made, among others, for alleged drug peddling and acts of public violence. We called for visible and effective policing precisely because failure to respond would be irresponsible in the extreme, as it would serve further to fuel tensions among communities. We called for compliance with the Constitution and other laws of the Republic and deportation of those who are undocumented. This message to act responsibly has been this message to act responsibly had been conveyed also to those who are undocumented. forgive me for this. But this message to act responsibly had been conveyed also to business in the country, starting with those in the hospitality sector, pointing to the folly and dangers of failing to comply with the laws of the Republic. Business is a critical partner in managing anti-immigrant sentiments, and more will be expected of them. In many cases, business incentivizes irregular migration, and those contributing to questionable labor practices must also be held to account. It is far easier and convenient for some to target desperate and vulnerable migrants than the unscrupulous employers who deliberately fuel tensions in the labor market. It is easier and convenient to target dwellers of run-down buildings than irresponsible buildings owners. In this regard, a paradigm shift has been adopted. We will now target unethical businesses that employ illegal practices. Government is working with business on these issues to ensure compliance, employment of locals, and harmonious relationships desired for development, economic growth, and empowerment of citizens. This work started before Rosettenville. As explained, businesses are a critical factor in some of these challenges. They should not fuel tensions, playing locals against foreign nationals, but should be on the side of the law. Our laws have been designed precisely to ensure that such tensions between locals and foreign nationals are managed in a regulated manner. We have a commitment of the hospitality sector on the need to comply with South Africa's labor and immigration laws, especially the requirement to employ a minimum 60% of local people. This is the message we are taking to the rest of business and will feature strongly in our upcoming meetings. There will be compliance inspection, there will be workplace inspections and penalties for employing undocumented foreign nationals to be exposed. We are making inroads also in this respect. A total of 63 people who were employed by the SPA without documented were arrested at the 3 SPA supermarkets. Of these, 19 females are detained at Pretoria North SAPS, and 36 males plus 9 females are detained at Camille Drift SAPS. The breakdown of these arrests is as follows: 19 females and 28 males arrested at Montana Spa, and the manager was charged. 6 females and 9 males were arrested at Zambezi Spa. The manager will be charged. 1 arrest at Dawnport Spa. Here the manager was not available. I have directed my office to set up a meeting with the management of Spa to discuss labor issues. Government is deeply concerned about outbreaks of violence, which may result in loss of life and or damage to property. This is why Cabinet has firmly pronounced on this matter and has expressed full support to ourselves and the Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster to move speedily in resolving these issues to the satisfaction of communities. Plenty of work has been done to improve our management of migration, and this is not a mere knee-jerk reaction to sporadic xenophobic violence. We have been diligently and perhaps quietly improving our management of migration. Our measured rhetoric on our immigration work is a deliberate attempt at avoiding populism that may be misconstrued and fuel tensions. We communicated our interventions and approach to Mayor Mashaba. I directed the DDG of Immigration to be available to the Mayor following our first meeting. I pressed upon him the importance of allowing our technocrats to do the work without the sensationalism we politicians may bring to the issue. While I have been critical on the approach, I must commend him for his more measured statement condemning xenophobia. While we have different approaches, I am confident that none of us wants to be responsible for any public violence or loss of life. I hold the view that we can better manage migration in a humane and responsible manner. It is important for the Department of Home Affairs and law enforcement agencies to understand the matters raised and make communities aware of how we are tackling them. I will share with you interventions we have undertaken since 2008. We have documented through the Zimbabwe Special Permit and the Lesotho Special Permit dispensations those who are in South Africa without documentation. This is helping in knowing who is in the country. As a result of the special dispensation, it is possible to get to higher levels of documentation in the country. Documentation also reduces the possibility of labor exploitation and abuse, which in turn facilitates fairness in the labor market. We have made improvements at Marabastad Refugee Reception Center, now called the Desmond Tutu Refugee Reception Center. This was to combat corruption and bribery. And we are also turning the tide against those people who are not supposed to go to the center as they burden the asylum system. President Jacob Zuma launched the Desmond Tutu Refugee Reception Center on Friday, the 17th of February, thus opening to the world its cutting-edge technology, featuring an automated booking system that's already transforming the way South Africa receives and processes asylum applications, with less queues and extremely constrained breath line for bribery, fraud, and corruption. We have initiated a comprehensive review and development of a new policy on international migration to replace the outdated 1999 white paper. A new white paper is being finalized and will be presented to Cabinet in March 2017. This is a bold move forward. Bearing in mind timelines for completing the legislative process, we have taken the Refugee Amendment Bill to Parliament. Its benefits are to ensure protection of genuine asylum seekers and to curb the exploitation of the system by economic migrants who capitalize on loopholes in the legislation. We have initiated the establishment of a border management authority for coordinated, secure, and efficient management of the borderline and ports of entry. It is important to move beyond stumbling blocks and speedily establish this integrated border management authority. Our department, in regard to the border management authority, will be guided by the decision of Cabinet. We will further be pushing aggressively to have capacity boosted and systems developed, including in immigration management services. This is an issue we are raising with the Portfolio Committee and the National Treasury. The capacity of the Inspectorate unit is far too low, with only 750 inspectors nationally, compared to the City of London in the United Kingdom, which has 3,000 inspectors. The Inspectorate has to ensure persons in South Africa are correctly documented, reside in the country on a lawful basis, and acquire documents and status lawfully. It has standardized systems relating to detention, detection, and deportation of illegal foreign nationals. A total of 33,339 people were deported during the 2015-2016 financial year. We are working with the police to synergize resources. We have worked closely with the Interministerial Committee on Migration, established after the 2015 incidents and chaired by the Minister in the Presidency, Minister Jeff Radebe. IMC intervention strategies have included intensive crime combating and prevention operations planned and executed in all provinces, targeted at hotspot areas. These operations were interdepartmental in nature. They focused, amongst others, on illicit drug trafficking and contraband, undocumented immigrants, human trafficking and prostitution, hijacking and illegal occupation of buildings, unlicensed businesses, illegal firearms, and management of RDP houses. I have listed the work our government is doing to better manage migration. I seek to dispel the sensational narrative that government is doing nothing. Migration matters should be handled delicately. Members of the public must be responsible, not to undo the work we are doing. We are of the view that the implementation of the strategic framework of the IMC on migration is still relevant, and if implemented, would help prevent outbreaks of attacks on foreign nationals as it goes to the root cause of the violence. The dynamics of migration of migration, crime, drugs, prostitution, fraud, and unfair labor practices are too serious to be turned into populist politicking. It is important always to be careful in the narratives we push in the public space. A democratic state bears the responsibility to save lives and to protect rights of persons. I wish to appeal to all South Africans to desist from rhetoric or actions that are xenophobic. I also want to commend the many responsible South Africans who have been a living testament to Ubuntu and tolerance. South Africa is amongst the most diverse countries in the world. We are a host to multiple nationalities from the world, and most especially the African continent. I reject any insinuation or assertion seeking to cast us as mere xenophobes. We have challenges. South Africa remains the most diverse country on the continent and is by many measures a beacon of tolerance and human rights. I have also been made aware of sound clippings as well as photoshopped pictures that are circulating both within our country and in other countries on the African continent. I wish to deny categorically that those are authentic. They have been photoshopped, as I say, and the sound clippings is clearly the work of somebody who seeks to cultivate hysteria in our country, to incite our public, as well as to drive fear among the foreign nationals, both those within the country and abroad. South Africa and the South African government will continue to do all in its power, working together as the security cluster to combat public violence, to ensure that xenophobia is dealt with, but above everything else, to continue to respond positively and genuinely to the concerns of South Africans. It remains our view that those who commit crime must not be profiled according to nationality, but we should deal with those who committing crime, whatever their country of origin, as criminals and alleged criminals, according to what our constitution and laws prescribe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Perhaps, Minister, I should encourage the Chief Director in Immigration to come join you forward in case there are specific details that might be required about some of the inspections we're doing. So if Mr. Matthews could come forward. I'm sure you guys know the drill, just a show of hands and then ask you a question stating which media house you're from too. I'll start with you, Paul.
Good morning, Minister. Paul Dekiota from Bloomberg. On Friday, there's apparently a march planned through Pretoria, an anti-immigrant march. Have you had any, or your department, any discussions with the organizers of the march, or have you identified the organizer of the march, and are there any specific concerns around such a march? Secondly, the spas where all the people are arrested, are they all in Pretoria? Sorry, Camille Drift, I just can't remember where that is, offhand. So if you don't mind just telling us about that. And then secondly, some African Union countries have been allegedly on a bit of a diplomatic offensive, alleging South Africa is a xenophobic country, especially now that chairmanship of the AU moves into other hands. Has your department been made aware of that, and is there any kind of South African government response to that? Thank you.
Okay, Kulevani, are you going to ask multiple questions like Paul or one? Because maybe we should answer Paul's questions and then come back to you. Is that fine? Or let me give you a chance, Kulevani. Just ask the question.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to find out regarding the efforts that the department is undergoing to keep migration in check through various agencies and units. In yesterday's budget, the national estimates of expenditure noted that the ceiling on employee compensation for the Department of Home Affairs would remain intact. Just wanted to get a sense of what effect that would have on the various units in the departments, especially considering the fact that Home Affairs wasn't opposed to an exemption from the ceiling on the ceiling on employee compensation. The Portfolio Committee Chair of Home Affairs wrote to Treasury to ask for this exemption. Now that it seems that there might not be an exemption up until 2019, how is that going to affect the various units, particularly Border Management Agency? Thank you.
Thank you, Kulugani. Minister, we'll take those 4 questions and then we'll come back for another round.
Thank you.
There's a person whose phone's ringing there with some interesting music.
It's a... Thank you very much. Thank you for the questions. Yes, Paul, as I indicated in the statement, I have engaged last week Friday with the organizers of the march to discuss the issues that they are concerned about and to bring to their attention the efforts that we are making as government to deal with the various challenges that they were, amongst others, raising. Obviously, concerns are there about the march, especially given this heightened situation of tension in Pretoria. We are working with them to ensure that there will be no public violence, no threats, and whatever risks may be there, we will deal with them. The police, even this morning, assured me that they are on the ground. They are also talking to the organizers of the march about the routes and about the management of the march. The police have been on the ground engaging the different communities, making arrests, ensuring visibility in the areas that have been affected, including in Mabopane, Garankuwa, in Atteridgeville itself. So the police are on the ground. Our desire is to ensure that this doesn't spread anywhere beyond these areas and whatever concerns, because as we say, the problem arises. I think the South African Human Rights Commission report indicated this correctly. The problem arises in many instances in that people commit crime and then there are cracks within the criminal justice system. Someone gets arrested this morning, then they are out on bail. Others are not even out on bail, they just simply walk out. They come back, they do exactly the same things they were doing prior to their arrest. In some instances, issues are reported to the state security agencies. There is no action to follow up on the reports that have been made. And that leads people to then start losing confidence in the commitment of the state to deal with the challenges which they are facing on the ground, which involve drugs, prostitution, illegal hijacking of houses, because there can never be a legal hijacking of houses. Now, so we are dealing with those issues. As we speak in Rosettenville, there are activities by the police on a daily basis to address the concerns that the communities raised. And the local leadership are taken on board with regard, maybe not the logistics of the activities of the police, but with regard to generally giving them the information that is sufficient for them to know that the police are here, they are working, they're dealing with the issues. And so the same applies to tomorrow. And I think what we had asked was that the organizers of tomorrow's march should, in their memorandum tomorrow, provide us with as much information as they can. They had mentioned a number of shops in Mamelodi that are not complying with our labor and immigration laws. And the was a representative of the Department of Labor at the meeting, and so we agreed that we were going to continue engaging with this group, but also undertake actions that are going to address the concerns raised with regards to various shops so that South Africans can be employed. Now, in light of that, there also was these fake news that are going around, and I took exception to one of them that was saying that the Minister of Home Affairs wants every company in South Africa to employ 40% foreign nationals in order to address unemployment. I took exception because I think in an environment of heightened tensions, you don't want irresponsible jokes. There are jokes you can make under normal circumstances when things are normal. But when things are not normal, don't make irresponsible jokes that may add fuel to the fire. Because what we are saying is that every company operating in South Africa must employ first and foremost South Africans. That is true of any other country. And this 60% is a minimum target, not a maximum target. We're not saying that every company must employ 60% South Africans and 40% foreign nationals. We're saying the 60% quota of South Africans is a minimum target. Go up. In actual fact, many people have been raising with us the question of why did we set a 60% target in the visa regulations of 2014. Obviously, the Immigration Advisory Board may come back to us and advise us to revise the 60% minimum target to increase it higher. And we will have to do that upon the advice, but we can't just do it willy-nilly, acting at a hoof. So we are paying attention to the issues that people are raising. As I say, we had already begun, even prior to this Rosettenville incidents. The whereabouts of these bars we will provide after the media brief so that you know where they are. But I must indicate that these are actions we are going to undertake throughout the country. We will be undertaking these actions, so I think that businesses better be warned that we are going to visit them to ensure compliance. And as we have done in the other shops which we have visited, we will charge the managers of these businesses for non-compliance with South African laws. There are many that we go to. I think many of us don't even need to be told about restaurants and other places where South Africans are just simply not employed. We are clear that businesses must employ first and foremost South Africans. But I also need to clarify this because it tends to create confusion. A person with critical skills is most welcome. A person with a visa or a permit that allows them to work is welcome to seek employment, and so those are documented. So if you hold a Zimbabwe special permit, a Lesotho special permit, and a refugee permit, or even a work visa, you've already been granted a work visa, yes, you are allowed to work. And with regard to those who hold the Zimbabwe and the Lesotho special permits, they were given those permits in lieu of them being employed at certain places with their employers having provided proof of employment for the individuals concerned. So we're not saying that those with permits who are currently employed must suddenly be fired, but we're saying companies must ensure that they have a minimum quota of 60% South Africans employed under them, wherever they operate. So that's the first thing. Now, with regard to the second question, regarding the African Union, I have requested a meeting with the AU ambassadors tomorrow afternoon to discuss the recent incidents and the measures that government is taking. But I think it will be necessary for the ambassadors, before they make pronouncements pronouncements to meet with government and seek to immerse themselves in knowledge with regard to what is going on the ground. Because even as we went to Rosettenville, the people of Rosettenville themselves, bar a few exceptions, were clear that we're not acting against foreign nationals. We're not against even Nigerian immigrants. We are against immigrants involved in crime as we would be against South Africans involved in crime. You will all remember that there have been many incidents in our country where communities have taken what I would call vigilante activities against South African criminals and took the law into their own hands, which we discourage. But what I'm trying to highlight is that these are not activities that communities, when they undertake them, they do so because the people involved are non-South Africans, even against South African criminals, where they feel that people have been terrorizing communities with immunity. Communities have taken action on their own and forced the state to then get involved. Obviously, we don't encourage that, but the AU ambassadors, we are going to be meeting with them tomorrow to explain to them what is going on, but we also expect them to also support our efforts, because I could never imagine a South African ambassador anywhere, say Brazil. There are a few hundred South Africans who are in prisons in Brazil for drug trafficking. I wouldn't imagine a South African ambassador in Brazil saying that, no, it's okay for South Africans to become drug moles and traffic drugs in Brazil, and if Brazil took action against them, then Brazil is acting in a xenophobic way. We expect that ambassadors would also appeal to their nationals to respect the laws of the countries in which they live. Because the point I always emphasize is that only South Africans have a natural right to be in South Africa. Everybody else is in South Africa by privilege granted by the South African government acting on behalf of the South African people. That's what the law says. That's why you apply for a visa. If you didn't have to apply for a visa, then you would be having those natural rights. The same applies to us when we travel abroad. Even in countries where South Africans have got visa exemptions, the fact that you don't apply for a visa doesn't mean that you have a natural right to be there. That government has given our people an exemption from a visa application, which means that we still have to seek permission from that country to be there. And in this regard, I think that the ambassadors, when we talk to them, I think we will engage with them on what's going on and discuss with them issues of rights and responsibilities. We're trying our very best to manage calm and responsible pronouncements in an environment where there is a number of international and domestic populists who seek to pounce on the vulnerability of immigrants in order to become popular and serve their national interests. Now, thirdly, on the question from Kulegani, those ceilings, the non-revision of the compensation, employee compensation figures is going to have an impact on us. It already does have an impact on us. I think we indicated that South Africa has 750 inspectors nationwide for the whole country. London alone has 3,000. If you take OR Tambo International Airport, the police have got 810 police officers at OR Tambo International Airport, we've got 750 inspectors for the whole country. If you look at Gauteng, we have 76 in Gauteng. In the Western Cape, we have 48. For the George Neisner Plattenberg Bay Belt, we have 5. So you can imagine on any daily basis when one could be on leave, the other one could be transporting those who are being repatriated, the other one could be doing admin work, the other one could be undergoing training, the other one could probably be sick. And on that day, we would not have a single immigration inspector in that entire area. So the issues of security are quite serious, and I think that it's a matter we will continue to engage with to try and get addressed and understood. Because if we don't, it becomes difficult for us to manage and mitigate and minimize and diminish risks to the country as a result of our inability to have sufficient capacity on the ground. And I think in this world, where we have seen enormous challenges in areas like Turkey, Brazil, or maybe Turkey, Brazil, Germany, in France, in Brussels, where people at one stage may have thought that they were safe and immune. I mean, I don't think anybody would have thought there could be an incident in Belgium, given that the country is small and very peaceful, not involved in international politics, except that it hosts the EU. If you look at the progressive decision taken by the German government last year and in 2015 to accommodate a number of asylum seekers, you would have expected that there would be no incidents there, but they were there. They happened. So we shouldn't think as South Africa that we are immune from any risks and incidents, that we are the country of Madiba, everybody loves us, and everybody who is coming here is coming to South Africa with the best intentions of our country. There's a lot of malicious, very vindictive people and organizations outside, and South Africa must not relent. And I think when we visited on state visits Nigeria, Kenya, and other countries, the presidents of those countries were very unequivocal to us, including in Saudi Arabia. They were very clear that do not take security for granted. Be on the alert. Don't get a rude awakening. You need to have enough risk management capacity to be able to deal with whatever risks that may arise in your country. So it will have an impact. It does have an impact, but we're not sitting back. As I speak to you, leading towards the budget vote, we are going to make some announcements on measures that we are going to take out of our own initiatives as the department to try and improve our capacity. I did mention in the statement that we are working on a collaborative effort with the South African Police Services. There are concrete proposals which we want to table before them, which they will hopefully consent to, which will assist, if they are agreed to improve our capacity. I think I've been very elaborate in my answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Okay, I'll take you two, then I'll go to Pretoria afterwards. Can I just start with this gentleman who's been waiting with me for some time?
Hi, Minister. Travis Andrews, CCTV China. I just wanted to get your comment in reaction to a figure quoted to us yesterday by President Buhari's Special Relations Advisor of 160 Nigerians killed over the last 2 years in South Africa due to xenophobic violence. I just wanted to get your reaction to that.
Thank you, Minister Leslie NCA. I'd just like the Minister's opinion. Following a post-Brexit world where a lot of that was due to insulation or isolation from that British public want, and immigration was a key issue, looking after the election of Donald Trump, looking at anti-immigrant riots in Stockholm last week. Is that wave spreading to the rest of the world and South Africa, or based on South Africa's 2008 incidents, is anti-immigrant sentiments not new to South Africa? And second, I think the Minister mentioned it, with only 750 immigration officers, and seeing that it was budget day yesterday, have you asked the Finance Minister for more money to employ some more immigration officers? Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. I'll take Karen here.
Hi, I have just a question of clarity. The AU ambassadors, Minister, that you were talking about, is it ambassadors from African countries or is it ambassadors to the AU? Also talking about the AU, there is talk about an African passport, and it was launched last year by Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. And we've seen countries like Ghana granting visa-free access to all Africans. What kind of work is being done in South Africa in this regard? And just a last question, monitoring and evaluation question. We had Operation Fiela announced in 2015 when we had similar xenophobic, or when we had xenophobic attacks. Does it mean, has Operation Fiela actually contained some of the violence, or does this renewed violence mean that Operation Fiela has to be revised, or that it has failed completely?
Thank you. Minister, I'm coming to Pretoria. Don't think I'm ignoring you guys. We'll just deal with Cape Town and we'll come to you in the next round of questions. So we can deal with those quickly, Minister.
Thank you very much. I think, again, thank you for the questions. I'm not privy to the figures from the Nigerian government and how they collected them. And we haven't, I don't think it's a discussion we want to get into. I think it will turn out very bad. Should we start counting how many South Africans have died in South Africa at the hands of Nigerian nationals, I don't think that's going to end up very well in terms of our good relations as countries. And so I think it's an unfortunate matter if it was raised in that fashion. It's an issue that we will surely take up at a diplomatic level and discuss with the Embassy of Nigeria and at government-to-government level. We should desist as countries from pointing fingers at one another in regard to issues that we may not have sufficient levels of information about. To my understanding, there is nobody in South Africa who has attacked someone purely on the basis of them being from another country. Whenever there have been incidents, they were sparked by something and they then blow up, because once you have mob violence or mob activity, it becomes very difficult to contain when the tempers are flying high. You need to contain the violence and then start asking people what actually started all of this. And then you realize, as it happened in 2015, that, oh, no, the problem was a factory in Durban that was not employing South Africans. And instead of people reporting this to us so that we charge the company and take the relevant action against it, they then took their actions, their anger against vulnerable immigrants. And that's what we are trying to discourage, so that people can focus on reporting issues to government, and we should act timeously to deal with the reports that have been brought before us. But for governments to point fingers at one another, it's something that we need to discourage very, very strongly. Because at the end of the day, we then heighten the situation rather than lessen it. Number two, There is a wave of xenophobic sensationalism, anti-immigrant sentiments that are being perpetrated in a number of countries. I don't think in South Africa we're experiencing that at an official political level, except in one instance. But from the point of view of national government, which is the custodian of international migration management, there are certainly no xenophobic sentiments which have been perpetrated. I think the president made a very strong statement last week at the Desmond Tutu Refugee Reception Center about the need to fight xenophobia, to manage our migration better, to provide sufficient resources to the Department of Home Affairs and other government departments to work together as a government to manage migration better, to ensure an effective management of our asylum seeker systems so that the people requiring asylum can be provided with the protection they deserve. And I think to that extent, we were very heartened by the President's strong support for the work that we are doing, for his strong support for South Africa to continue providing shelter to refugees, and for us to manage the economic migrants in the manner that we have begun doing, I think with regard to the Zimbabwe and the Lesotho special permits, and to ensure that going forward we look at what measures must we take on a sustainable basis to manage economic migration, because in South Africa that's the biggest challenge we're facing, economic migration. If you look at the numbers of people applying for asylum in South Africa, only less than 5% of those eventually qualify. 95% plus are economic migrants. And when we introduced in 2010, in 2008, when we introduced the Zimbabwe special permit, the numbers of asylum seekers just dropped drastically. There were times in South Africa around 2008 when asylum seekers numbers were as high as 200,000, but they have dropped right down to 65,000 to 62,000 in 2015, 2016. And that is because of the interventions we made to manage economic migration of Zimbabweans and Basotho. There are many other measures we need to take to improve our immigration management, and the Border Management Authority, the finalization of that bill before the end of the financial year by Parliament, both the NA and the NCOP, would be but another measure, because they will help us to meet our target to start implementing the BMA and constituting it. So in South Africa, we're watching. We are concerned because we experience large mixed migration flows. So yes, we are concerned. We are watching, observing very closely what's going on internationally, but we're not worried that you are going to start. You know, the important thing that happened even in Rosettenville, and as we were talking to people there, one, they said, we must stop distorting them and saying what's happening there is about xenophobia. They said, if it was about xenophobia, we live with many immigrants and they have not been affected. We didn't go randomly to ban every house where immigrants live. We targeted 6 houses, and the only reason we targeted those houses was that there is drugs and prostitution taking place in those houses. And in those houses, there are children that are being injected with drugs during the day, turned into prostitutes at night. And that's why we attacked those houses. And we then said to them that, you know what, if you had reported this to us, we would have rescued the children, because I, as the Minister of Home Affairs, together with the Minister of Social Development, are interested in the children that were in those houses. We want to know who they are. We want to know whether they've been trafficked from outside the country or from within the country. We want to take them through rehabilitation, counseling, and ensure that they receive necessary support before we can reintegrate them with their families. Now, when communities act on their own, the children scatter, and we can no longer find these children. But you can also understand when they say, but we've reported this. Some of your authorities in government, police, magistrates, immigration officers, are in cahoots with the criminals. So we report, and the criminals come back laughing at our faces, telling us that nothing is going to happen anyway. So that's why it's so important that we should come out this afternoon from the cluster with a very concrete program to deal with these challenges wherever they have been raised. Now, if I may just then quickly refer to Operation Fiela, because it relates to this. No, it's not failed. It has been continuing, not on the same scale as in 2015, but it has been continuing. What we are going to be doing is to assess whether we need not once more upscale it. So there are proposals that the department is going to make to the security cluster meeting this afternoon to try and propose how we should deal with the challenges that are being raised in the country. Because government would be wrong not to listen to the genuine concerns that South African communities are raising. In actual fact, even immigrant communities have been issuing statements condemning the crime, condemning the drugs, calling on their nationals to respect South African laws, because one immigrant that acts in a criminal way puts at risk every other immigrant, because in a foreign country, immigrants are naturally vulnerable. And so it is necessary that we should all measure our messages to the public and communicate with one voice. Indeed, Lester, we have asked for more inspectors. We don't have any, but we are going to find other ways to deal with this challenge. And as the point, which is the point I was saying earlier, that we're looking at other initiatives to improve that situation. There are proposals that we are making to our colleagues in the police on how they could be roped in to assist us. Karen, the ambassadors that we are meeting tomorrow are AU ambassadors. Well, fortunately, Morocco has also been now. It was the only country outside the AU. They've now been accepted into the AU, so we expect that it will be a full complement, plus the Dean of Ambassadors. With regard to the AU passport, as well as the SADC uni visa, South Africa has been of the view that we support measures towards integration. We support measures towards free movement. We think that they will assist to develop our economies and ensure greater integration and person-to-person interaction. But there are steps towards the achievement of those objectives. I think countries that receive high inflows of immigrants, like South Africa, an unregulated freeing of movement would tilt the burden of the movement heavily towards those countries. You can mention a few countries, and South Africa is one of them. And as the president said, we are one of the top 10 countries in the world that receives high numbers of immigrants annually. So that means that we need to be cautious how we move forward. There are certain steps that must be satisfied. Standard economic development, every country must have strong security measures to ensure that you don't turn a blind eye, for example, to human traffickers, victims of human trafficking, and criminal rings operating in your country or through your country just because they are not destined for your country but are transiting to South Africa. Then you say, let me turn a blind eye to this and pretend it's not happening. It is South Africa's duty to protect her neighbors as it is our neighbors to protect us. And that's why we've been insisting that we must be very circumspect about what is happening in South Africa, because if we are not, it may have an impact on tourism and economic development right throughout the SADC region and even the African continent. When there was an outbreak of Ebola in the west of Africa, our tourism here in South Africa was affected, and yet there was no Ebola incident in South Africa. So it's important for all of us as countries to act responsibly towards one another, bearing in mind that there are still negative perceptions in the world about Africa. If you're saying you're coming to South Africa, someone somewhere would tell you that they've got a friend in Ghana and expect you to know them. And it's because people have a myopic view globally about the African continent as if we are one tiny little piece of land where everybody knows another. But in actual fact, we support the AU passport, we support the SADC uni visa, we support the free movement protocol in SADC. We believe that they must be implemented in a gradual manner.
Thank you, Minister. I'll just quickly run to Pretoria. So, Thabo, if there's any questions in Pretoria, this is your moment to shine.
Thanks, Wayne. We have three questions. I'll start with Peter, and then Sipo, and then Sosa. Thanks.
Sure.
Good morning, Minister. Peter from Jacaranda FM. I just wanted to ask if you could perhaps elaborate on the initiatives that you just mentioned in terms of increasing capacity to ensure enforcement, not only migration officials, but ensuring that, for example, businesses also comply with labour laws as well as immigration laws. Can you tell us about your engagements, perhaps by any chance, with high commissioners or embassies in the country? I see, for example, the Pakistani High Commission released a statement on tomorrow's march. And then just lastly, do you have any figures perhaps on the incidents that have been recorded in the past 2 weeks?
Sipo Mabena for the Times newspaper. Minister, the common sentiment or outcry on the ground amongst the local communities is that there are just too many foreign nationals in the country, legal or not, competing for skilled jobs, economic opportunities, as well as living spaces with South Africans. One question, what is your response to this sentiment, and just how many foreign nationals are currently in South Africa? What is the estimate number of those that are undocumented? Then two, in your view as Minister of Home Affairs, does this number then justify the sentiment that there are just too many foreign nationals in the country? Thank you.
Thank you.
Last one?
Oh, there's another one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'm Bomani Kosa from the Sowetan. Of the undocumented immigrants that were arrested in the Pretoria suburbs, in the spas there, what exactly have they been charged with, and why are they being dealt with by the SAPS and not, immigration officers? And also, regarding the managers, I'm sensing some dithering really on what to do about them. Because the statement is spotlight with the undocumented immigrants that they were arrested, right? But then when it comes to the managers, it says that one has been charged and others are going to be charged. What does the department want to happen with them? What should they be not just charged but arrested as well? And what should be the charge against them too?
Okay, thank you, Thabo, for your moment of shining. Minister will tackle those three questions, and then we'll have to close because I think there's another department that's into this venue.
Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues in Pretoria, for your questions. Peter, the difficulty with elaborating the measures we've requested from the police is that I will be elaborating an expectation and not the outcome. Maybe let me, once we have an outcome, also brief you on the outcome. I hope for a positive outcome. With regards to the meeting tomorrow, it's with the AU, African Union ambassadors. The Pakistani ambassador, I have not heard his statement, but we hope that if he had issues that he wished to raise with us, he would raise those issues with us. And certainly we also have issues to raise with him too. So we would be happy to have an engagement with him. I actually appreciated the approach of the Lesotho Minister of Home Affairs. I want to commend him when we were dealing with the Lesotho special permit process for his approach of hands-on engagement with the Lesotho nationals, coming to South Africa to meet with them to ensure that they comply with the provisions that we had made, because it actually removed the burden only on us. And he also took core responsibility for ensuring that he encourages the nationals of Lesotho to obtain the relevant documents which were required to apply for the special permit we were offering, and to meet our deadlines. That's something very commendable. I think it's something which we would want to see, including encouraging those who had obtained South African documents illegally, given the amnesty we had provided, to surrender those documents in order to take on the special permit. Sipho, you know, this is a very difficult question. It's a very difficult question in all over the world. As I say, South Africa receives high volumes of migrants. I think the option South Africa faces is whether we shut ourselves down to the rest of the world or continue to benefit from the contribution of the peoples of the world to the South African economy. And you know, when people say there are too many foreign nationals in the country, they mean there are too many Africans. That is the problem. That is the problem. They mean there are too many Africans in South Africa. Now, we can't accept that narrative without criticizing it. It is our responsibility as leaders to educate our people about the challenges, because I don't think anybody has said that the people who are here, you know, there are those views from time to time that, oh, the people who are in South Africa, they are there because they also supported you during the struggle. But in the main, people are in South Africa. They would not have come to South Africa during apartheid because the apartheid government would not have allowed them to. In the main, they are economic migrants, and they highlight both the attraction of the South African political system and economy, as well as the difficulties of the economic and or political systems of the countries of origin. Some of those people take enormous risks to get onto makeshift boats to travel all the way through a dangerous Mediterranean to try and reach Europe. Thousands of those over the years have perished in the Mediterranean, died never to be seen again, never reached the countries of destination, nor returned to the countries of origin. The challenge is a broader challenge. It cannot be resolved sensationally by saying, yes, there are too many immigrants in South Africa, therefore shut down the border, erect a 6-meter long security fence, and block everybody. Because South Africa must choose whether to integrate in the African continent or be isolated. And if we isolate ourselves from the African continent, then who are we going to integrate with? What are we going to be part of? We can't both be priding ourselves to be an African country and seeking the benefits of African integration, and at the same time try to isolate ourselves from Africa to enjoy the benefits of being South African alone. These are choices we need to make. It's a bit difficult to estimate, and I know this is not what you were saying, so don't say I'm accusing you of that. I'm saying let us enrich the public discussion, because at the same time we need to educate, much as we address the concerns raised, but we also need to educate. It's difficult to say how many foreign nationals are in South Africa. I can tell you, with regard to those that we have documented, we can pull the figures together, how many immigrants, how many are on work visas, how many have critical skills visas, and so on. But it's difficult to say how many are undocumented, because if somebody is undocumented, how do I know that they are here? They didn't tell me that they were arriving. The issue for us is to look for sustainable solutions going forward. Whilst I'm not saying that the Border Management Authority will be a panacea for all our problems, but it's going to go a long way towards improving greatly our management, because when it is operating at full capacity, it will have sufficient capacity to manage the borderline, to ensure we have not only the fence, but the technology to manage the borderline as well as the personnel. It will manage our ports of entry. And I think our ports of entry, even as we speak, are well managed, given that we have the enhanced movement control system. At least I can, straight after this interview, after this media briefing, I can tell you how many people have entered South Africa through Bait Bridge between 12 this morning and right now it being 12. I can tell you how many people entered and exited at all our ports of entry, because at least that much we're managing very well. And those people who have entered through our ports of entry have done so carrying passports that are machine readable. They complied with all the requirements for entering the country. But insofar as undocumented migrants, I wouldn't know. But at times, South Africans confuse undocumented and documented migrants. And I think that's the point that the president was making last week at the Desmond Tutu Refugee Reception Center. That it's not true that all immigrants in South Africa are undocumented. It's also not true that all immigrants in South Africa are criminals. Neither is it true that all South Africans in Brazil or Taiwan or Thailand or Peru are drug traffickers. The fact that there is a South African sitting in prison in Peru for drug trafficking doesn't mean that when I'm also in Peru, I'm also a drug trafficker. I must not be judged by the criminal actions of a few people. Neither should we judge the majority of immigrants in our country by the criminal actions of a few. If you look at the prison population of about 160,000 in South Africa, I think about 9,242 are immigrants. And what the Immigration Act says is that once an immigrant has been convicted and served a sentence, when they come out of prison, the Minister of Home Affairs must ensure their deportation to the country of origin. And every week, we deport many who have served sentences. We then send them back home so that they are no longer in South Africa. So we are acting, as I say, last year we deported 33,339 people. In the previous year, there were about 40,000 odd. So we are acting, if I may use the word, to rid South Africa of those who are undocumented. And Lindela Repatriation Center is quite busy all the time. No, Bongani, you are, perhaps you don't understand the issue that we are raising. There's no dithering. When you have not yet charged someone, you can't say, I've charged them. It's just simple as that. So when we say we are going to charge the manager, we mean we have not yet charged the manager. We wouldn't report that we have charged them when we have not yet charged them. That we will charge them, there's no doubt about it. The manager who was not there at one of the spas when we came will be charged. There's no dithering there. And that's why in the statement we made the statement that oftentimes we focus on the employee that is undocumented and not the company that documents. And that's why the statement that I said, that I read just about an hour ago, clearly said, companies be warned, businesses be warned. We are coming for you. We will charge the managers. And yes, if you employ an undocumented immigrant, we are going to deport that immigrant. The undocumented migrants are undocumented, so by law they have no right to be in South Africa, so they will be deported. Unless there is a crime that they are being associated with, for which they will then be charged. But if they have not committed any crime with which they are associated, they will then be deported to the countries of origin. Their detention at the police stations is only a temporary. It's when the operation is conducted, they are then taken there in order to be moved to Lindela so that we can then process their repatriation. Because before we repatriate somebody, we also take their biometric details. We take their fingerprints and do everything and then check that against the police records to see if they do not have any crimes for which they are being sought by the police, so that they can stand trial for those crimes. So that's what we're doing. It's a very operational matter that we deal with in the course of our daily work. So don't panic, my brother. The managers will be charged. There's no dithering there, and the undocumented migrants, unless they are associated with particular crimes, they are going to be repatriated. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I'll close the session now. So if there's any other questions that need to be addressed, we'll be outside for a few minutes to speak to the media. Thank you all for coming and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tabo,
I already sent him a message. That's why I was coming. I wanted to ask him.
Thank you.
Yes. Sure. You did warn me that you wanted to do this. I didn't think you were serious.
Thank you, Digi.
Right, well, the Minister of Home Affairs, Malusi Gigaba, briefing the media there on the xenophobic tensions that have been happening